A coward who panics at everything accidentally falls into the ocean and wakes up in another world. He's given one bizarre ability, the power to summon boats. The god who reincarnated him even calls him a loser and tells him to stop wasting his second life. So he sets himself one ridiculous dream: earn enough money to one day own the greatest luxury liner in the world. From tiny fishing boats to massive ships, every new summon brings him one step closer to his impossible goal. This story begins with the protagonist, Wataru Toyomi, trying to figure out what happened. When he woke up, he was in a meadow. Then, for some reason, a horned rabbit chased him, and he had to run away screaming. He screamed, "What the hell? Why is it chasing him?" His name is Wataru Toyomi. He's 20 years old, and he's an ordinary college student and otaku. He loves anime and manga. Yesterday, he ate and drank with friends at a cafe. He remembers singing karaoke until the morning. After that, he walked along the road across the bridge home. But no, he fell into the ocean. After that, he woke up in a meadow. Maybe this is a fantasy world? Horned rabbits often appear in novels, don't they? Who knows? Maybe a status screen will appear before he knows what's going on. Suddenly, as if on cue, a system window appeared in front of him. He happily thought, this is the status. Looking over his stats, he learned that his class was captain, his level was first, and in addition to his rather impressive stats, he possessed the skills, language understanding, and ship summoning. A notification for a new message appeared under his stats. The protagonist was surprised to open it. Someone had written to him, saying it was nice to meet him. He'd fallen into the interworld and flown into this world. Unfortunately, he couldn't return to his own world. The MC exclaimed in confusion, "What is this?" The invisible interlocutor regretted not being able to interfere too much, but he thought it was too cruel. Therefore, he bestowed upon him two unique skills: language understanding and ship summoning. The former meant he could understand all languages, read, and write. He chose ship summoning because he was cast out of the sea and because it seemed to suit his name. Then, let him enjoy this world. He bid it farewell. MC lay down on the grass, spread his arms and legs, and muttered, "Is this really another world? And he can't go home. What should he do?" He sat up, lost in thought, and scratched his head. Suddenly he remembered and exclaimed, "No problem. He has skills. Summoning ships, that sounds cool. I have to try it immediately." He went to the system window, selected the desired summoning, and clicked on the description. That's how he learned he could summon purchased ships. Only for purchased ships, the skill maintains ships in optimal condition, allowing him to control them with ease. He can purchase a new ship from the store menu. Continuing to work with the screen, he mused, "I see. His first boat is a rowboat." He thought he figured out how to do it. The protagonist extended his hand and summoned ships. At that moment, a magic circle appeared on the water's surface. He exclaimed in surprise, "This is amazing." A boat emerged from the circle, and a wave washed it onto the shore. The stunned protagonist examined the vessel and noticed it was an ordinary boat as expected, and it was on grass. He began to drag it into the water. Suddenly, he saw a horned rabbit approaching him. He screamed in fear. Again? Another one from the other side? The protagonist clutched his head, sat down on the bottom of the boat, and thought dismally, "Will the rabbit kill me?" Suddenly, everything went silent. He removed his hands from his head, looked around, listened, and said in surprise, "Are they gone?" Looking over the side of the boat, he saw one of the rabbits lying near the boat, showing no signs of life. The MC asked in confusion, "Did it fall and die?" To make sure, he moved the rabbit's body with an oar, but the monster didn't move. He thought, "I'm not sure, but it seems I'm saved." He was now sure that with this ship, he was safe. Maybe he had a special ability. Looking at the sky, where clouds were beginning to gather, he noticed the weather was getting worse. He had to find the village. After that, MC decided to see if he could get the boat back. When he succeeded, it also impressed him quite a bit. Then, the protagonist looked at the horned rabbit and wondered if he could eat it. He didn't know, but perhaps he should take the loot with him. He'd heard that the animal's blood had to be drained for storage, but he had nothing. He wondered if he could use the rabbit's horn to drain the blood. This rabbit was very cruel. This world could be very dangerous. Having done everything necessary, MC tied the rabbit carcass to his hand and set out. He walked carefully, looking around warily. After a while, he said, "He must have walked a lot. He's in the forest now." It looked like more monsters might appear. Besides the horned rabbits, there were others. Suddenly, a rustling sound was heard behind the tree, and a goblin appeared. He thought in fear, "Monsters." The protagonist ran as fast as he could, and in a panic, noticed a goblin chasing after him. What should he do? The boat he'd summoned earlier, could this be his salvation? He didn't notice a cliff appear ahead. He leaped into the void at full speed, fell screaming, and crashed to the ground with all his might. The goblin, assessing the situation, turned and left. The protagonist rubbed his bruised head and muttered, "It hurt." He thought he was going to die. Getting on all fours, he crawled, hoping for cover, and suddenly realized there was another cliff ahead, and in it, a settlement. He exclaimed in surprise, "He's saved! It's a city!" The MC quickly found himself at the bottom and joined the line of people entering the city. The guard at the gate let the old man and his horse through and declared, "Everything's fine. Next up." When it was the protagonist's turn, he looked at the guard, shaking with fear. The guard said, "ID, please." The protagonist thought in confusion, "What? He can't say he's from another world." He had to lie. He said he was attacked by a monster on the way. He'd lost all his things. So how was he supposed to get inside now? The guard looked at his ingratiating expression in bewilderment and said, "Well, that shouldn't be difficult. They'll give him a temporary ID so he can stay in the city for 3 days. But first, let him touch this appraisal crystal. With these words, the guard extended his hand, holding an orb. The protagonist said, yes, of course, and touched the crystal. The guard looked at the orb and said, yes, it seems he's not a criminal, and he can pass. Welcome to the Western City. The protagonist thanked him, breathed a sigh of relief, and entered through the gate. He was stunned by what he saw. A crowd of people were milling around him, among them ordinary humans, beastmen, and dwarves. He noted with confusion. This really was another world. He was very curious, but first, he needed to do something. The ID he received at the gate would expire in 3 days. He was told to register with the Adventurers Guild before his temporary ID card expired. Walking a little further, he saw a distinctive emblem above the entrance to one of the buildings and thought, shield and sword, is this the place? Entering, he stopped and looked around in surprise. There were quite a few people standing, walking, talking. It was quite lively. He glanced at the reception desk, where a beautiful receptionist stood. She said, next, please. The protagonist thought admiringly at how beautiful she was. He didn't immediately notice Greg, who was standing next to the girl. Only now did the protagonist notice that there was a long line to see the girl, while no one was there for Greg. The protagonist sadly thought that he would have preferred the beauty. But he was tired, so he'd have to approach this old man. Approaching the counter, he apologized and asked if he could register as an adventurer. The man replied that he could, but the registration fee was 1 silver coin. MC thought in confusion, I don't have any money. He wondered out loud if he could pay with 2 horned rabbits. Greg answered gloomily, that's not enough. He could request a loan in the form of a silver coin to pay the registration fee, but the repayment period was 1 month. The protagonist wondered how much 1 silver coin was worth in yen. He asked, for example, what he could do to earn silver coins. Greg said, for example, they buy these horned rabbits for at least 5 copper coins. If he brings 20, it will be about a silver coin. The protagonist noted, 20 rabbits. They were so ferocious. Will he be able to catch the required number? A debt in another world. What if this is hell? His fertile imagination painted a picture of a ferocious Greg, who was angrily asking, is he going to repay the money he owes? But when his ID runs out, he will be kicked out of this city. Looking at the gloomy Greg, he hiccuped in surprise and said, he will borrow a silver coin. The man replied, all right, then let him place his hand on the crystal. When he did, a document appeared from a device located under the crystal. MC looked at it. Greg said, it's an F-rank adventurer card. He noted in surprise, adventurers have ranks? The man noted, that's right, from F to SSS. A person completes a certain number of queries to increase their rank. Is there something they want to hide on their card? If he thought of such a hide command, it would disappear from the information on his adventurer card. He thought, great, his last name and his unique skills stand out, so he'll think about hiding it. Greg added, don't forget to exchange the horned rabbits at the counter in the backyard. And finally, read this brochure. With that, the man handed him the brochure. He ended up selling the horned rabbits for 7 copper coins each, and a guild worker told him about a cheap place to stay. When he arrived, the innkeeper said it was a large room upstairs. MC thanked the woman and went up to the room. When he entered, several people were already there. He noted with surprise that this room felt like a pack of sardines, but he was glad he had a place to stay. There was nothing else in the room, including a bed. Everyone was lying right on the bare floor. He, too, settled into his seat, noting how uncomfortable it was. Picking up the booklet, he thought he had 4 copper coins left and his debt was 1 silver coin. He should start earning money tomorrow. He should probably read this. As he began to read, he began to drift off. He thought, I should imagine the beautiful guild worker explaining this to him. The protagonist imagined her explaining it to him. First, the guild is not affiliated with any country. It does not participate in the war. However, anyone can accept a request to participate in the war. Adventurers can accept quests 1 level higher than their rank. For adventurers of rank C and above, mandatory requests appear in emergency situations. They can also be nominated for a request. Second, if he doesn't accept any requests for a certain period of time, his adventurer card will expire, so be careful. Then, placing the booklet on himself, he closed his eyes blissfully and said, okay, I've read it. His imagination is certainly a bit wild. He probably wouldn't mind working in a guild. By the way, is ship summoning really useful? With these thoughts in his mind, he fell fast asleep. The next day, waking up, he went downstairs and wished his mistress good morning. The woman laughed and replied, it's already noon. He needs to wash up. While taking a bath, the protagonist noticed a bucket, just like in Japan. He didn't like it. He would have liked a towel and a toothbrush. After that, he went out into town and bought himself some food, for which he paid 3 copper coins. Looking at the people, the protagonist thought, so many people, including elves and dwarves. And this one, he's actually a beast man. After lunch, he decided to go to a safe place to test the summoning. Leaving the city, MC looked around and said, good, he doesn't think anyone is watching him here. After that, he summoned a ship. The familiar boat appeared before him again. After examining it, he said in surprise, after all, it was just a regular rowboat. Why did that horned rabbit die yesterday? Well, since he had no money, he'd rely on this skill. Suddenly, someone's scream was heard nearby. The protagonist saw a guy running towards him as fast as he could, yelling at him to get out of here quickly. Those were horned rabbits. A whole herd of those monsters was indeed chasing him. The protagonist screamed in fear. He didn't even have time to notice the guy run past him. He just thought, looking at his back, so fast? The horned rabbits started jumping on him. He exhaled in panic, But then something incredible happened. The monsters started smashing against the barrier that protected MC's boat. When the protagonist realized this, he was very surprised. He said in bewilderment, "Are the rabbits falling away?" Maybe that's what he thinks. He should check the status. At that moment, a system window appeared in front of him. It contained information, a starting wooden rowboat with a maximum of 2. Its skills were no boarding and unsinkable. The protagonist, confused, muttered, "The ship's stats are unsinkable and indestructible. Is that true? And what's no boarding?" He needs to look at the description. It became clear to him that nothing can board without the captain's permission. He looked around and thought, "Is that a barrier? That means monsters can't board." MC jumped up from the bench and joyfully exclaimed, "Is that a cheat?" He has a cheat skill. Then, calming down, he took an oar in his hand and thought, okay, if they can't get inside, he can kill those horned rabbits. He needed to time it right. After calculating the time and waiting for the monsters to start attacking, he hit one of them on the head with the oar, and the rabbit collapsed to the ground. MC exclaimed in surprise, "He did it!" He defeated the horned rabbit, but one wasn't enough. After some time, he brought his catch to the shop in the back of the guild and said to the seller, "Sorry to bother you, but he would like to sell all of this." The man remarked in surprise, "Wow, he'd hunted a lot this time." The protagonist thought, actually, he'd caught more, but he couldn't take it all with him. He needed to buy a bag. After some time, the man paid him, saying, 1 for 7 coppers. So 10 for 70 coppers, okay? The protagonist happily replied, yes. He was glad he'd earned some money without any trouble. He could stay at the inn again. Returning to his room, he was delighted. He had a place to stay. Now, he should really check the boarding ban. The description said that nothing could board unless the captain gave permission. If permission was revoked, the person or object would be thrown overboard. If anyone tries to attack him on board, they'll be thrown overboard. MC said in amazement. He understood. If he gets into the boat, it won't break or sink, and monsters won't be able to climb on it. He's completely safe. This is simply amazing. If he had money, he could summon better ships. Looking at the goods in the store on the screen, he began to choose. He didn't need a swan boat, but he wouldn't refuse a motorboat, a luxury liner. I wonder what kind of ship that is? He doesn't think he'll be able to afford it in his entire life. The protagonist settled down more comfortably and said with a smile, now that he thought about it, who gave him the ability to summon a ship and sent the first message? I wonder, some god? Tomorrow he will do everything in his power and will hunt rabbits again. First of all, he needs to pay off his debts, and so began his life in another world. The next day, he greeted the innkeeper with a friendly good morning. The woman smiled and returned the greeting, then remarked, "Are you hunting horned rabbits again today? Be careful." He replied that he understood, waved, and left, saying he was leaving. Walking through the city, he thought, my name is Wataru Toyomi. He was an ordinary college student, but after falling into the ocean, he ended up in another world. Today was his 5th day in this world. Once outside the city, he began hunting horned rabbits again, using his skill. After a while, the protagonist exclaimed, "This is excellent work, and all thanks to this boat's cheating skills." He also thought, thanks to the unique skills he received from the mysterious man, life here is peaceful and pleasant. He stood up from the bench, but the boat rocked and he almost fell. The protagonist activated the screen, looked at the merchandise in the store, and decided that when he saved up enough money, he'd like to buy this handy rubber boat. After some time, he returned to the seller. The man praised him. "Well done. These 25 rabbits will be easy to process. So how about 8 copper coins each for a total of 2 silver coins?" He happily asked. 2 silver coins. Of course he did. Taking the money pouch, he thought, considering the 90 copper coins he already had, he could afford the rubber boat. Suddenly, a stern image of Greg appeared in his mind, grimly saying, "Let him return the money he owes." He said dejectedly, "Okay, wait. I need to return the silver coin he owes the guild first." When he arrived at the organization, he saw another beautiful girl behind the counter instead of the one. He apologized to her, confused, and said he'd like to return the silver coin he'd borrowed when he registered. Could he do that here? Louise replied with a smile. Yes, please let him show her his guild card. He held out his hand, thinking admiringly, another beautiful worker. Those ears of hers, were they dog ears or fox ears? He caught himself and, handing her the things, said, "Here's my guild card and a silver coin." The girl took them, processed his document, and gave them to him. She said, "Look, she's deleted the debt from his guild card. Please let him confirm it." The MC asked in surprise, "Do they record things like debt on the card?" Louise replied, perplexed. Yes, didn't they explain that to him when he registered? He replied. They gave him a booklet and told him to read it. Louise realized it was Greg and thought irritably, this old man is just an idiot. Then she smiled and said, let him forgive them. Now she will explain everything to him. He eagerly expressed his attention and willingness to listen. He thought, here's his chance to let his imagination run wild. She already looks beautiful in these clothes, but imagine her on a romantic date by the ocean? His vivid imagination conjured up a picture of Louise in a swimsuit, sitting at a table, asking if everything was all right. Chasing away such thoughts, he told himself, it's all unreal. But his imagination continued to paint the picture. She, crossing her legs, said he had a debt on his guild card, but he could also deposit money. He could deposit and withdraw funds from both the Adventurers Guild and the Merchants Guild. Leaving large sums of money in the guild was wise. Many people carry around the amount of money they usually use. As she spoke, He imagined how they could have fun at sea. Louise interrupted him, asking in surprise, "Is he listening to her?" He caught himself and quickly replied, "What? Oh yeah, that's very convenient, isn't it?" She looked at him sadly. The protagonist thought sheepishly. He could see it in her eyes that she thought he hadn't been listening. He'd been a little distracted by her beauty. Louise sighed and continued. Also, she just looked at his adventurer card and noticed he hadn't accepted any quests yet. Had he? He replied in surprise. Really? He only hunted horned rabbits, so he wasn't accepting any requests. The girl pointed out that if he didn't complete quests once a month, his adventurer card would be revoked. Sometimes they'd get quests for horned rabbits, so please have him check the notice board. The protagonist, confused, said, "I see, thank you very much." Louise added, "Also, goblins and wolves are sometimes encountered outside the city." She recommended that he have minimal equipment, just in case. He looked at his clothes, a t-shirt and jeans, and said, as he could see, he'd learned a lot. After some time, MC came to the library. Picking up the book, he said, "I should explore this world better. This is it, a guide to the Latin kingdom. Is this the territory he's in now?" So he learned that the royal capital is in the center of the kingdom, and in the north, northeast, and west, there are counts, each governing their own city. By the way, the Western Count lives here, in the Western City, which seems to be the central city in the West. It's quite a large city, judging by the map. He'd like to go to the Southern City. It faces the sea and is connected to the royal capital by a large river, so trade is thriving. He thinks the ability to summon a boat will come in handy. He hasn't even sailed yet. He also learned from the book that all the races living in this world are typical of fantasy. Dwarves, elves, and beastmen. That girl with fox ears, Louise, looks like a beast woman. He picked up the next book and read the title, An Introduction to Everyday Magic. Should he read this next time? He also wanted to go shopping. The next day, he went shopping. After a while, the protagonist, looking at himself in his new outfit, happily thought, he bought it, an adventurer's set. It cost 1 silver coin, leaving him with 72 copper coins left. Arriving at the guild, the first thing he did was go to the notice board. Today, he would attempt a quest for the first time. He began to mutter thoughtfully, carefully reading the ads, F-rank requests, weeding, moving assistance, finding a lost cat. The protagonist thought in surprise. The administrator said he could accept E-rank requests. Goblin slaying. Goblins were too much. Here was the ad he needed. Someone needs 8 horned rabbits in good condition. The reward for this was promised to be 80 copper coins. Should he give this and his guild card to the administrator? Approaching the counter, he thought happily. This is the girl with fox ears from yesterday. Approaching the counter, he greeted Louise and noticed her surprised look. He thought he had strange equipment. The girl in turn wished him good morning and admiringly said, "Now he looks like a real adventurer." The protagonist was embarrassed and said, "Really? Thank her very much." Handing her the request, he added that he would like to take this. Louise wrote it down on his guild card and said, "Request accepted. This is his first quest. Please let him try his best." He replied with a smile. "Okay." Briskly walking to the quest, he thought with a smile, "This girl with fox ears is so kind. This is probably her job, but with her support he feels so excited." After a while, wiping his forehead, as the protagonist said, 10 horned rabbits in good condition. The request said 8, so he already had enough. Well, he could hunt a little more. A rustling sound was heard behind a tree near the boat. He exclaimed, "Come on, let the 11th rabbit out." But a goblin suddenly jumped out from behind the tree and rushed at him. MC screamed in fear. It's a goblin. The monster, just like the horned rabbits, bumped into the barrier. The boat swayed and MC almost fell off the bench. He tried to calm down. Wait, the boarding denial is blocking him, but he was so close that he was scared. This barrier, can it withstand such an onslaught? What if it breaks? Let it give in quickly and go. Suddenly, the monster's attention was drawn to a beast running past. The goblin turned and ran after him. The protagonist let out a sigh of relief, thinking he was gone. Jumping out of the boat, he exclaimed, "We need to hurry back to the city." As he ran, he shouted, "Get the ship back." The boat immediately disappeared. As he ran, only one thought haunted him. Faster! Stopping to catch his breath, he looked around, wondering when he would get there. Suddenly, he realized he hadn't taken the rabbits. He left them in the boat when he escaped. The protagonist began to rush about, exclaiming disconsolately, what should he do? He doesn't know where his ship goes when it's recalled. Should he hunt them again? But there's a goblin there. This is his first request. Why today of all days? He remembered Louise's words to try harder, and he buried his head in his hands, trying to calm himself. Looking around, he trudged back, carefully making his way to the place he needed. He hoped the goblin wouldn't return. Suddenly, he heard a rustling sound, and he quickly summoned a ship. When the boat appeared on the magic circle, his entire catch was there. He noticed with relief, they were here. This is simply wonderful. In a burst of emotion, he began hugging the bags of loot and exclaimed, "Wonderful," as expected of a cheat. "Thank you so much for this." After a while, Louise said with a smile, "Yes, all 8 rabbits were of good quality." This was his first request, and she congratulated him on it. A worker joined her and also congratulated him. One of the adventurers praised him. He did well on his first quest. The girls also praised him. He did an excellent job. He did amazingly. MC was embarrassed by this, and at the same time he was thrilled. He was so happy that he had done his best. Later, returning to the inn, he thought, he caught a lot today. Now he knows that horned rabbits sell for more if there's demand for them. Reaching his room, he lay down, activated the screen, and noted that when he returned the ship, his belongings remained safe and sound. This was a great discovery. From now on, he wouldn't have to lug anything around, and perhaps he'd find other uses for it. On the screen, he admired the rubber boat again. In the following days, he again had fruitful success hunting horned rabbits on demand. Upon returning, he had to wash his gear. When he submitted his work report to the guild, he was paid his reward. The protagonist exclaimed joyfully, 2 silver coins and 40 copper ones. This is simply excellent. Now he can afford to buy a rubber boat. The protagonist went outside the city and commanded the ship purchase screen to open. When the product image appeared, he happily thought, here it is, a large rubber boat. Suddenly, a small slot appeared on the screen, and the system began asking for a coin. He was surprised. A coin slot? He was supposed to insert money here. That was weird. But MC complied with the request and activated the buy button. At that very moment, the very boat he dreamed of appeared before him. He exclaimed joyfully he'd made it. Lying down on the bottom, he rejoiced like a child. This was amazing. He could put things here too. He could put a table here or a blanket to rest on. This was so great. The protagonist didn't realize someone was watching him from above. The deity, observing his charge's joy, said in confusion, it shouldn't work like this. He needs to take action. The protagonist, sensing some changes, sat down on the bottom of the boat, perplexed, thinking he felt a strong pressure coming from somewhere. The god continued to stare at him. Sometime later, he visited the clinic. After waiting for the couple in front of him to leave the doctor's office, he thanked her and approached the door, only to hear, next. Hesitantly entering the office, he apologized to the doctor and hesitated. The doctor asked how she could help him. MC thought admiringly. Her glasses and outfit, it was as if she were cosplaying. It had been a month since he'd arrived in this world. Today, he went to the city clinic, and the reason he'd done so was important. Sitting down on a chair in front of the doctor, he said, actually, when he was little, he couldn't learn life magic, and when he consulted with the people in the guild, they referred him to her. The doctor exclaimed with a smile, I see. Then, he needed to spread some magic throughout his body and see if he could use it in about 5 minutes. Medical services cost 10 copper coins. Could he afford that amount? The protagonist handed her the money and exclaimed, yes, here you go. He thought, good, it's time to learn magic. Magic exists in this world. Of the many types, life magic is the most common. It's simple magic that almost everyone can use. As far as he knows, you can create things like glow, a small amount of water, or a wind flow. His status said he also had magical power, so he should be able to use it. The doctor took his hand and warned him, starting to inject magic into his body. He feels a magical flow inside himself? The protagonist thought sheepishly. He's holding hands with a beautiful doctor. Wait, he shouldn't be so worried. He needs to concentrate. The doctor said that in addition to her magic, he should feel his own. MC closed his eyes and concentrated on the sensations. He felt a warm flow throughout his body, emanating from the doctor's hand. I wonder if this is his magic? He opened his eyes and told the doctor that he felt a very thin flow next to her magic. Is this his magic? The girl remarked in surprise. Thin? That's strange. Perhaps he's endowed with a small amount of magical power? The protagonist responded with confusion. His magic status seemed to be at 18. Couldn't he really use life magic with that much power? The doctor replied, no, he can't use it fully. Now, have him concentrate on gathering magic in his fingertips. He repeated in amazement, in his fingertips. After that, he stared at his fingers and mentally commanded the magic to gather. The doctor approached him from behind, took his hand in hers, and said, now, have him do this. Draw a magic circle. When he ran his finger across the space, a magical pattern indeed appeared. The protagonist, realizing this, exclaimed joyfully he had finally activated it. The doctor laughed and noted that this magic should actually burn for about a minute, so it wouldn't hurt to practice. Leaping from his chair, he bowed and thanked her for her help. The doctor smiled and replied, you're welcome. There's a church nearby. If he prays to the god, perhaps he'll achieve success faster. He thought in surprise. A church? After a while, the protagonist, following the doctor's advice, approached the holy house. Looking at the church's domes and its exterior, he thought, it's a church. He wondered what gods exist in this world. Although, come to think of it, who was the person who gave him the message and skills at the beginning of the game? Maybe it was a god. Should he pray? He'll do it next time. He's already late for work. With that, he ran to the guild. The MC approached the request board and thoughtfully wondered what kind of quest he should take today. There were as many as 5 requests for the delivery of horned rabbits. Each request required 8 to 10 of these monsters. He figured he could complete a couple of the requests and still have plenty of free time left. Taking the flyers, he approached the counter and asked the worker if he could take 2 orders for these at once. The girl replied with a smile. Yes, of course. The protagonist exclaimed, excellent. For some reason, the number of requests for these monsters is growing, the worker said. That's right. A lot of restaurants have been ordering them lately. She laughed and remarked that it was all thanks to his constant, high-quality delivery. He sheepishly patted the back of his head and clarified, "Really?" He mentally rejoiced. Everything was working perfectly. At that moment, they overheard a conversation between two beastmen. The girl asked if she would definitely be able to get horned rabbits today. The man replied that he didn't know. He had just posted the order, but other restaurants were also chasing these high-quality monsters. The girl pointed out that he wanted to sell the roasted horned rabbits he was so proud of, right? The protagonist thought in surprise. Roasted? He was simply intrigued by this. Approaching them, he turned to the man and asked if he was the cook. The girl answered for him. "Yes, that's right," MC said. "He's just been selling these monsters to the guilds lately. If they want, he can catch a few for them." "Can they show him their errand?" the beast woman asked in confusion. "Would he really do that?" the man remarked. "It would be a great help," the protagonist answered, but in exchange, he'd like to ask them for something. The beastman looked at him in surprise. After some time, he set off on his quest. On the way, the protagonist said, there are a lot of people in need of horned rabbits. He needed to give it his all, and today, he would do it. Arriving at the designated spot, he summoned a ship, onto which he built a gazebo made of wood scraps for 1 silver coin. He'd previously asked the carpenter to build it. Having settled in comfortably, he joyfully exclaimed, "The raft with the gazebo is ready. Now he can hunt while he rests." All that was left was to buy a stove and some tea. What a peaceful and pleasant life. After some time, MC returned. He thought, today's catch, 55 horned rabbits. That's his new record. In the end, he managed to complete all 5 requests, earning 5 silver and 36 copper coins. In yen, that's about over 50,000. Not bad, right? Well, after work, he'll go fulfill another wish. Finding the sign he needed on one of the buildings, he noted, "Is it here?" The beast woman from whom he took the request greeted him with a smile and said she'd been waiting for him. Thank him so much for his catch. She's cooking it right now. Please have a seat for now. MC thanked her and settled down at one of the tables. While waiting, he looked around and noticed that he'd never been to a restaurant in this world before. He couldn't wait to try the food. Noticing 2 guys drinking drinks, the protagonist thought they looked like adventurers. They must have come here for a drink. At that moment, a familiar chef approached him, brought him a ready-made dish, and said he apologized for keeping his esteemed customer waiting. Placing a plate of food in front of him, the chef announced, "It's roasted horned rabbit." The protagonist's delight knew no bounds. Cutting into the meat, he delightedly noted the crispy baked skin, the sauce, the wonderful aroma of herbs. After tasting the dish, he had to admit, it was so delicious. The chef asked, well, how did he like it? The MC, honestly, replied delightedly, very delicious. He was amazed that those monsters he hunted had become such a magnificent dish. The man said with a smile, "I'm glad he liked it." The girl added, "It's all thanks to yesterday's prayer at church." The protagonist thought in surprise, "Church again? Does everyone go there?" The next day, when he came to the guild, Louise said he probably didn't need advice, but he'd been running errands non-stop these days, and he certainly hadn't been resting, right? It was worth taking a break sometimes. Why shouldn't he go to church and pray? The churches in this city were very beautiful, even attracting tourists. The protagonist thought in bewilderment. Everyone was telling him to go to church. Or how could he explain these oddities since yesterday? Everyone was only talking about the church. Oh well, it would probably help something. Otherwise, why would they all tell him to go to church? To be honest, he was a little afraid something was wrong there. But he wanted to thank God for his skills, so it was worth going. After a while, he came to the church building. Entering, he saw several people praying in front of a pedestal with a statue on it. He thought in surprise, curious, but even the atmosphere here was different from outside. Was that a statue of a god? He really did look strong and powerful. MC knelt next to the girl, folded his hands in prayer, closed his eyes and thought, well, was it God who sent him these skills and this message? Thanks to him, he can live in this world. Thank him so much. Suddenly, God's voice rang out and he replied, "You're welcome." The protagonist stared at the statue in amazement and exclaimed in confusion, "What?" God replied, "Summoning a ship is truly a remarkable skill, isn't it? The landing band can even resist a dragon's breath, and if you step on the magic circle during the summoning, you can stand on the surface of the water." The protagonist just let out a surprised sigh. The god asked, "And yet, why didn't he become an adventurer? Doesn't he care? Besides, it's about time he showed up." The protagonist, completely shocked by what was happening, looked around and saw no one next to him. He asked in amazement, "Aren't you a god by any chance?" The man sitting on the throne answered, "He is the god of this world." The MC joyfully spread his arms and exclaimed, "He knew it! And he really is a real god?" The deity chuckled and said, "Of course, he is the creator of this world, the most majestic living being in it. And what does he think of his throne? He wants to praise it, doesn't he?" The protagonist thought in surprise, "Praise it? This guy is a god." The deity exclaimed, "What's wrong with him? It was a bit difficult to bring him here. He's not much of a believer, as you can see." The protagonist apologized, noting that he was a bit vain. He said out loud to the divine creator, thank him for granting him these abilities. God replied, "Something else entirely. Does he know why he summoned him to this world?" He replied, "No, why?" The creator said, "Because he lives too boringly." The MC exclaimed in bewilderment. "What?" God replied, He's been watching him through this crystal this whole time, but all he's done is hunt horned rabbits. The other gods are also outraged. The protagonist, confused, asked, was he being watched? The creator replied, well, yes, he's from another world. Many gods are eagerly awaiting this, as aliens from other worlds often act unpredictably. But for him, everything is, as usual, sad. They are incredibly bored. The god of pleasure even said something like, he's so boring that I want to quit. And the gods of war and demons say that his unique skills are nothing. The protagonist thought sheepishly. He lives quite normally in another world, but a god is scolding him. The creator added, well, yes, if you give people from other worlds unique skills, then they will all become heroes, villains, or monarchs, and they will do whatever they want. That's why he gave him a weak skill. MC quizzically remarked, Lord, or hero. Wouldn't it be bad if people found out he's from another world? The god countered. He didn't say he had to do the same. But most people use skills much more often to gradually influence this world. That's what they, the gods, expect. He can't just hunt horned rabbits for the rest of his days. The protagonist spoke up in his defense, confused, but he only just arrived. The creator sighed and said that if he bought a luxury liner, he would be able to eat food from his world. Doesn't he really miss the taste of his homeland? The protagonist asked in confusion. Does he mean he'll be able to eat rice? The god exclaimed, exactly. On a luxury liner, he'll be able to use the shops of his world. Of course, they have the best restaurants, but he can also watch movies and videos. The MC was stunned, thinking, no way. If he got a luxury liner, he'd be able to return to civilized life. The creator added, well, he won't be able to use TV or the internet. But still, the unique skills he gave him are incredible. So, is the motivation working? The protagonist happily exclaimed, yeah, right. He'll give it his all and use his skills as often as possible. The creator smiled and said, well, that's a different story. He trusted him. Let him try his best. After all this, the protagonist opened his eyes, saw a familiar setting, and thought in surprise, he's back. So that's how he got his main goal in this world. Running out of the church, he joyfully exclaimed, well, he'll get this luxury liner. After some time, sitting in a rubber boat in the gazebo, he activated the screen, went to the store menu, and dreamily declared he'll buy a luxury liner. Of course, easier said than done. It costs a whopping 500 platinum coins. In Japan, that would be 500 million yen. That's incredibly expensive. Unless you're an adventurer, a merchant, or have a low income, you shouldn't even think about buying one. But he was pleased to know that summoning a ship was a seriously cool skill. That's what God had told him, basically. If you stand within the magic circle when summoning, you'll appear in the desired location on the ship. While the ship is summoned but not in use, time stops for the items on board. If he buys a new ship, his ship's summoning skill level increases, and at a certain level, he can even summon a ship in another world. He thought about it and noticed that the skill was probably most often used for trading. In any case, if he had a ship, he would want to reach the city on the southern coast. He would need to find a way. Sometime later, when he voiced his desire in the guild, Louise asked in confusion. He wanted to reach the southern city? He sheepishly apologized, noting that he thought she might be able to help him. The girl replied, that's right, she knew a good route. But if he went to the southern city, he would no longer be able to deliver horned rabbits. The protagonist cursed himself. Looking at Louise's sad expression, he thought, I've upset the beauty. What kind of terrible man is he? Then the girl suddenly smiled and said, well, she'll explain it to him. He was surprised. Her mood had changed so quickly. The girl explained that to reach the southern city, he first needed to head to the capital. People usually either take the road south from here or travel by river. There's also a river between the western city and the capital, leading directly to the southern city. But it's not particularly well developed, so the journey would take about 10 days. In fact, any route is dangerous. He'd also need a night watch, so she'd advise him to form a group. He wondered, surprised, a group? He hadn't thought about it, hoping it would be safe enough on a raft with a gazebo. The protagonist bowed and thanked the girl. Louise said it was okay. He could ask whatever he wanted. Turning to leave, he thought the girl with fox ears was kind, but he didn't even know her name. Talking to someone so beautiful was impossible without nerves. Suddenly, Louise touched his shoulder, catching his attention, and asked shyly, if he doesn't mind, would he like to grab a bite to eat somewhere tonight? MC felt a sudden rush of heat and exclaimed in surprise, what? Turning back to the exit, he decided he was imagining things. It couldn't be true. Someone touched his shoulder again. He turned around with a smile, thinking it was Louise, but they were adventurers. Aldo asked, isn't he the one who always hunts horned rabbits? His friend invited him to go with them. The protagonist hiccuped in surprise, then hesitated and said, no, he has plans. Aldo didn't back down. Come on, just for a couple of seconds. The protagonist panicked and thought, what should I do? They'll kill him. He wanted to scream for help, but Aldo asked, he doesn't mind if they hunt horned rabbits too. His friend added, they won't get in his way, please. MC thought in confusion. What? After a while, the guys invited him to the table, and Aldo said they were also adventurers and needed money for new equipment. He seemed to be making good money, so they were interested. but of course if he refused, they would understand. The protagonist thought in surprise they weren't so bad. So, he said out loud, he didn't mind at all. The assignments to catch horned rabbits were getting too many anyway. He couldn't handle them himself. Aldo shook his hand and happily clarified, "Is that true?" After that, the guy told him his name and added that he was the leader of his group. The protagonist told them his name in return. The leader said they would pay for everything today. Could he teach them how to hunt horned rabbits? He said. Yes, of course. They sat at the table for a while, drinking, eating various dishes, and chatting like old friends. MC said, by the way, he planned to hit the road soon. If they were traveling, it was better to do it in a group like theirs, right? Aldo pointed out, in a group? Yes, that was the best choice. But he was always alone, wasn't he? In that case, he could try working as a merchant's bodyguard. Soloists below rank D weren't paid, but it was still better than traveling alone. The protagonist, surprised, admitted it wasn't a bad opportunity. Aldo added, however, that if he couldn't defeat something like a goblin, he wouldn't be accepted as an escort. He replied that he'd try. So, the next day, he began preparing for the journey. Meanwhile, he continued to earn money by catching horned rabbits. He trained with a spear and a bow at the guild, not for free of course, and he gradually collected food from the raft. After a while, Aldo asked, is he ready? He needs to relax. The protagonist thought enthusiastically. Today, he and this guy will be defeating goblins. The group's leader said that if they encountered any goblins, he would leave him alone. He should try to defeat them. He thanked the boy. On the way, he accidentally stepped on a branch, which snapped loudly. MC shuddered and hiccuped in fear. Aldo asked if he would go ahead. He thought he was scared. The leader's comrade said he would, and went ahead of the group. Suddenly, Aldo turned to the protagonist and smiling exclaimed, let him see. He asked fearfully, what goblins? The guy answered, no, it's a slime. The protagonist, surprised, clarified, what a slime? The leader said, these slimes are the cleansers of the forest. They absorb and cleanse the corpses of monsters. MC, seeing the creature, admiringly exclaimed how cute it was. Can he touch it? Aldo replied, just for a little while. If he touched it for too long, it would absorb him. When the protagonist touched the monster, he was touched. It was so soft and jelly-like. His image was reflected in the slime's body. Unable to bear it any longer, he grabbed the monster and said he'd take it with him. Would it be okay if he took it? The leader exclaimed in confusion. What? Let him calm down. Does he have tamer skills? If not, then slimes and other monsters aren't allowed inside the city. The protagonist began to play with the slime like a ball, having a great time. Comrade didn't understand. Is he even normal? The leader himself, equally confused, asked, what's he doing with the monster? The MC released the slime and embarrassedly scratching the back of his head, said, I hope they forgive me. I've gotten a little carried away. The leader said, no big deal. Okay, they need to go. The protagonist thought about it. At first he was scared, but the desire to tame this slime became overwhelming. He must learn all the necessary skills to take this for himself. Aldo reminded them, their target is the goblins. Let everyone be on guard. Suddenly he screamed, goblins. The protagonist cowered in fear, clutching his spear, and panicked, thinking, they're coming. Aldo and his comrade bravely entered the fray, skillfully dispatching the monsters. After a short while, the leader shouted, MC, it's his turn. The protagonist, watching in fear as the enemy approached, overcame himself and replied, let him have it. Waiting for the goblin to get closer, he raised his spear forward, pierced the enemy's chest, and screamed, let him have it. He thought he had stabbed the spear into him. How disgusting. Aldo screamed, just one more strike. The protagonist abruptly pulled his spear out and delivered another blow to the monster. He sweated from the effort and exhaled heavily. Then, pulling out his spear, he looked in surprise at his fallen enemy, thinking he'd killed him. Aldo praised MC and said all that remained was to collect the goblin's magic stones near their hearts and right ears. The protagonist remained silent, turning away to the forest. The leader asked in surprise, what's wrong? Looking at his hand, he said, the monsters are scary and nasty. Apparently, he couldn't become an adventurer. Aldo paused for a moment and then remarked, perhaps so. After some time, the allies celebrated their safe return. The leader exclaimed, today the protagonist defeated his first goblin. Congratulations. The leader raised his glass and encouraged everyone to join him. Aldo's companion asked, so, when does he plan to leave for his journey? MC replied, in a week, the leader said. Then they'll all see him off. Thanks to his training in hunting horned rabbits, their income has tripled. He thanked his new comrades with a smile. After a while, the protagonist went to the guild to say goodbye to everyone, and he also had to thank Louise. His imagination conjured up a picture of her tearfully begging him not to leave. He stopped himself and thought, he needs to calm down. But when he entered the guild, he was simply amazed. There was a huge line ahead of him, but all the adventurers were standing right there waiting for Louise. Greg was bored at his workstation. Seeing him, Greg beckoned him with his finger. The protagonist grinned and thought he hadn't crossed paths with this old man in a long time, and now he was calling him. When he approached, Greg asked, so he decided to go to the southern city? He answered in surprise, yes, that's right. He thought, how could he know? Louise must have told him about him. He was so happy. The old man said in his grim manner, thanks to him, more adventurers have started hunting horned rabbits. He agreed. Greg continued, before, missions to catch these monsters had paid little, and they themselves hadn't earned much. But word of his quick income had already spread. Their staff was very pleased. MC thought sadly. What? But he wanted to hear it from Louise. He said it out loud. He's glad to hear it. And then the day of departure arrived. The protagonist said goodbye to the innkeeper, his new friends, and the adventurers he knew, and set off with the cart. After some time on the road, he reached his destination. After saying goodbye to the travelers, he looked around and thought, I found it. Here it was, the river he was looking for. From here, he would begin his solo journey. Finally, he would summon a boat onto the water, not onto land. God also told him that if he stepped on the magic circle during the summoning, he would be able to float. So he had to try it. While summoning the ship, he stepped on the magic pattern and, in complete amazement, said, Amazing, it's true. After that, he jumped into the boat that appeared, laughed, and exclaimed that he had only floated for a moment, but the feeling was amazing. Well, it was a start. Now he was heading to the southern city. As he rode, he noted that he wouldn't look so cool in a rowboat. Further along the way, he admired the scenery, the birds, and even fell into a small waterfall. Finally, it was late evening. The protagonist began to scan the shores and said, It's getting dark. Maybe he should take a rest somewhere. Suddenly, on one bank, he saw a group of people sitting around a fire. Looking at them more closely, he thought how scary their faces were. They looked like thieves. He was afraid he might be attacked, so it was best to just continue downriver. He quietly began to swim away from that spot. After a while, he noticed another fire. Taking a closer look at the group of people, he thought in surprise, Girls? What should he do? There was a chance they might be thieves, but if they were attacked by bandits themselves, he would feel bad. Maybe he should warn them from the boat. Swimming closer to the shore, he greeted the girls. They shuddered and turned to look at him. He was amazed at their beauty. But before he could say anything, Alessia pointed her sword at him and menacingly demanded, Who is he? If he makes one more suspicious move, he's a corpse. What does he want? MC raised his hands and thought in confusion. These girls are definitely stronger than him, so they didn't need help? Out loud, he asked peacefully. Let her go easy. He was just an adventurer. He was worried about them, as he'd encountered some bandits upstream and simply wanted to warn them. Alessia smiled and thanked him for the information. After that, the girl turned to Marina, who was sitting in a tree, and asked if she could scout out the situation. She readily answered, Of course. She went. The protagonist took up the oars and said, Well, that's all he needed, Alessia exclaimed. Let him stay here until they were finished. He thought in bewilderment. What? Why? But out loud, he said, There are bad guys hanging around nearby, so he'd rather not linger here. The girl shouted. Stop, she said. Perhaps he's in league with those guys and trying to trick them. He thought indignantly. He would never do such a thing. Now they suspected him, although, he'd admit, he looked suspicious. Out loud, he said in a downcast voice, He understands. He just didn't expect this outcome. He looked at the girls and thought they were all amazing beauties. And their gear looked like adventurers. Such beautiful groups only existed in fairy tales. Wait, he'd found himself in a world that was very much like a fairy tale. How cool it would be to be alone with them. He imagined one of them playfully calling him over and offering him some wine, just the two of them. He immediately stopped himself. No, just stumbling upon such a beautiful group had already gotten him into trouble. At that moment, Marina announced she was back. The girls whispered something, and then Alessia turned to him and said with a smile, she apologized for the misunderstanding. Everything turned out exactly as he'd said. She hoped he'd accept her gratitude. He replied, confused. No, that's okay. He thought they wouldn't have had any trouble even without his warning. The girl remarked in surprise, Really? But this information was useful. The protagonist asked, puzzled. Helpful? She winked at him and said, It seems these bandits are wanted, so they'll get a reward for this. He noted sheepishly. So that's who the victim was. She said that if they met again in the future, she asked him to let her thank him. He waved goodbye, sadly, thinking that he'd probably missed his chance to get closer to them. But he couldn't deviate from the route, so there was nothing he could do. He set off again. A few days later, he joyfully exclaimed, Finally, he saw it, this southern city. Indeed, a large and beautiful settlement lay on the shore. Ships and boats were moored there, and seagulls soared and cried above the sea. The protagonist was surprised to notice how many boats there were, all made of wood. Suddenly, one boat with people caught his eye. He exclaimed in amazement, Homemade boat? It moved with magic? He thought, considering there were such boats here, they could be compared to a motorboat. It would be very convenient and economical to have a motorboat. Well, time to moor and continue on foot. Once he did, MC set off into the city. He was impressed by everything he saw here. The people, the buildings, the goods. He thought, the atmosphere here is very different from a western city. Approaching one of the street vendors, he asked for a fried fish and asked if he knew where the merchant guild was. The man replied it was near the harbor, and he should just walk along the shore. What, was he a merchant? The protagonist sheepishly replied, yes. He was thinking about starting a business. He mentally noted, right. It was time he became a merchant, so he could get his hands on a luxury liner sooner. With the ability to summon a ship, he could definitely start his own business. After some time, the protagonist arrived at the merchant guild. He was surprised to see so many well-dressed people there. Everyone was extremely polite to each other. MC felt himself starting to get nervous. At that moment, Camilla, a guild employee, politely greeted him and said, Welcome to the merchant guild. Maybe she'd find out what brought him here. He wondered in surprise. Was there a cutie with fox ears here too? The girl called him to the counter. The protagonist greeted her with a stutter, sat down on a chair, and continued. He had a lot he wanted to ask her. Would she mind? Camilla laughed and said, Of course not. He thought she was dazzling. Apparently girls with ears like that were his weakness. He said out loud, First of all, He's in the Adventurers Guild. Could he join the Merchant Guild? Camilla replied, yes, it's possible. But anyone can register, starting with F-rank peddlers. Joining the guild requires a deposit of 5 silver coins. He replied, I see. He actually wanted to buy a ship. Would there be any work for him there? The girl said, of course there is. It all depends on what kind of ship he needs. He thought, a magic boat. A self-propelled ship is called a magic ship. He said, it's a small magic ship. Camilla drawled thoughtfully. Even such a boat is not so easy to get. Laughing, she remarked, he's well-connected, right? MC thought, well-connected? He knows God? That would do, I wonder. Camilla, looking at his confused expression, said, perhaps she could explain everything about the magic ship. The main job on such a ship is to deliver people to cities, particularly the capital. Everything else depends on the ship's capabilities. If it can take adventurers to the western island, the rewards will be very high. This island is home to rare herbs and powerful monsters. Valuable materials can be obtained, but the island is surrounded by sharp rocks and uneven water depth. Also, there is no route to it. Only small boats can get there. On top of that, the current is very fast, so currently only 4 ships can reach it. He thought in surprise, I see. So, by reaching that place, he will get some kind of bonus level? The protagonist inquired how much he would get for taking a person to the island. The girl replied, 10 silver coins per person per day. He thought excitedly, that's 100,000 yen. 50 silver coins per day if he can fit 5 people on the boat. When can he start? The girl added, the materials from the island completely cover this price. The protagonist decided he was in business. He exclaimed, wow, well then, he'll join the Merchant Guild. Camilla asked matter-of-factly, what about a mooring space for the ship? She could offer him one for 1 silver coin per month. MC replied, yes, he'd agree to that. That makes 6 silver coins, right? She said, that's right. She'd write it all down on his adventurer card, so please let him leave it here. When everything was done, she handed him the document and said, thank you. His payment has been accepted. His mooring berth is 115. He bowed to her and said, thank you for your time. Camilla replied with a smile, you're welcome. That's her job. After a moment's hesitation, he added, his name is Wataru. Thank you for your support. The girl looked at him in surprise and then replied, her name is Camilla, and she's looking forward to working together. Sometime later, walking down the street, he happily thought, he was so glad he was able to introduce himself. Along the way, the protagonist saw an inn sign and wondered if they had a free room. He ended up getting a room with 1 bed, which pleased and delighted him. Looking out the window, he exclaimed with a smile, and with a sea view too, 50 coppers a night, including breakfast and hot water. A little expensive, but oh so comfortable. Tomorrow he would buy a motorboat and try to reach the southern island. The next day, early in the morning, he set off for the shore. Following his usual pattern, he purchased what he wanted from the shop menu and exclaimed, great, he has it. Of course, he was a little worried. What if it wasn't made of wood? Well, it was worth the risk. Slotting 2 silver coins, he was surprised to see on the screen that his ship summoning skill had been upgraded to level 2. New possibilities were now open to him. He could summon the ship he'd received, plus another one, create maps of the area, and even camouflage ships. Among the available ships was a Japanese-style boat. He asked in surprise, does summoning +1 mean he can summon 2 boats at once? Creating a topographic map? What's that? And ship camouflage? He's sure he's always needed that. Well, time to try it. He summoned a ship, and a motorboat appeared before him. The protagonist was delighted. Finally, he felt like he was on a proper boat. But at this rate, everyone would find out he was from another world, so it wouldn't hurt to try out the ship camouflage. He summoned it, and a transformed boat appeared before him. The system informed him that ship camouflage allowed him to change the appearance of a vessel by altering its structure but not its frame. His delight knew no bounds. He exclaimed, this is simply amazing. It had become entirely made of wood, as expected from the skill bestowed upon him by God. Somehow he could control it, so it was a real cheat. And he also knew the location of the island. So let's get going? MC happily set off, buffeted by a light sea breeze. He knew the journey to the island would take about 8 hours. With a break, the round trip would take about a day. Standing at the helm, glancing at the compass, he exclaimed, what a wonderful feeling. A short time later, the island came into view. Having moored to the shore, the protagonist grinned in surprise and exclaimed, he's here! Less than 5 hours had passed. At that moment, a man called out to him and said, I hadn't seen him here before. The protagonist shouted back, saying hello. He just bought a new boat, and the Merchant Guild recommended he come here. His name is Wataru. The man replied, he's Gudo. Nice to meet you. New boats would be a good idea. He's been literally swamped with assignments lately. He thought in surprise. Wow. The MC replied out loud, I can't wait to help him with his work. Is there anything special about it? Maybe there are some nuances to this job. Gudo replied, yeah, like killing time, for example. The protagonist asked in surprise, what? The man replied, after entering the island, adventurers don't have to return for 2 to 3 days, but if they're suddenly injured, they have to make an unscheduled return to town. So they stay here all the time. Plenty of free time, the protagonist thought in surprise. So that's it. After some time, he returned to town. Mooring the boat in its place, he said, excellent. He returned faster than expected. Now that he knew he could get to the southern island, he needed to stock up on things for the boat and for his leisure time. He didn't notice a man looking at him gloomily from the side, adjusting his hood. A while later, returning from the market with a full basket, MC happily noted a change of clothes, dishes, a cauldron. He'd bought too much, but he could make money. It gave him strength. Now he'd be able to buy a new ship soon. The same unknown hooded man appeared behind him, holding a knife. At that moment, an object fell out of the protagonist's basket, and he turned to pick it up. At that moment, someone lunged at him with a knife, clearly intending to do something bad. He grabbed the man's hand, pushed the knife away, and asked in confusion, why did he do this to him? The man asked, is this boat on the shore his, right? The protagonist, taking advantage of the man's confusion, began to run away, screaming for help. The bandit shouted, let him stay. The MC thought irritably, did he come for the boat? Oh no, that can't be. He screamed, let someone help him. Running into the gateway, he felt someone grab him by the collar of his shirt from behind and drag him somewhere. Panicked, he was speechless. The bandit, pursuing him, cursed and said, he lost him. Meanwhile, Camilla, the one who saved the protagonist, locked the door with a bolt, listening to the sounds outside. Then she turned to him and asked, is he okay? Seeing the horror on his face, the girl explained that this was the back door of the merchant guild. He, recovering from fear, explained that he had returned from the southern island and was shopping when suddenly this man attacked him. Camilla asked in surprise, he was able to reach the island? The protagonist, surprised by her reaction, answered, well, yes, she said, I see. As she said, a ship capable of reaching the island is a very valuable thing. Many people want the same thing for themselves, so some simply cannot afford it. He thought in a panic, what? Does this mean they will hunt him now? He wondered out loud, what should he do? Maybe run away to another city? Camilla told him to calm down. MC asked, do other people like Judo, the man he met on the island, deal with this? The girl answered, they hire guards or buy slaves to help. He exclaimed in confusion, slaves? He felt sad. There is still slavery in this world, and slaves are probably expensive. At that moment, the door opened, and the head of the merchant guild entered the room and said he heard his problem. Let him leave it to him. He'll handle it. The protagonist thought in surprise, this old man, really, the guildmaster? Camilla smiled at the man, addressing him as the head. The protagonist noted, he knew it. The head asked, his name was Wataru, right? He was sorry this had happened. He'd have to spend some time outside the city. He had an assignment for him regarding the southern island. Would he be able to handle it? In the meantime, he'd find security for him. The MC wanted to object, but the old man continued. A ship capable of reaching the island was a real treasure for the guild. He'd support him as best he could. He could stay here for the night. He replied to the man in surprise that he understood. The next morning, Camilla came to his room with breakfast, smiling. She wished him good morning and asked how he slept. He replied sheepishly, well, more or less. After a while, the girl helped him carry his provisions and said the guild would provide him with food for the trip this time. He thanked her. Camilla added that they would now meet the adventurers who would be traveling to the island on his boat. He looked at her in surprise and said, okay, he thought to himself. Until last night he thought he'd hit the jackpot. Yes, that was all he'd thought. Now his life would always be in danger. The girl exclaimed, oh, they're already here. The protagonist, seeing the girls from the shore, exclaimed in surprise, what? They also looked at him in bewilderment. Camilla continued, this is a group of A-rank adventurers. They're members of the Girasol group. After a while, the girls boarded the ship and sailed to the island. Alessia, the group's leader, asked if it was him they'd met at the river the day before yesterday, hadn't it? Dorothea, the deputy leader, remarked, yes, she definitely remembered. He'd warned them about the bandits, hadn't he? Irma, the group's mage, chuckled and said she never would have thought they'd see each other again. She guessed it was fate, right? Kara, the group's tank, complained how hungry she was. Marina, the group's scout, merely chuckled in response. Claretta, the team's priest, exclaimed, yes! She was suggesting they thank the protagonist for what he'd done for them. Perhaps they could have dinner in town? Alessia remarked, sounding wonderful. The girl turned to him and said she'd definitely treat him. He just let out a surprised breath and thought, God, he can't believe he's met this group of beauties again. He thought they'd never see each other again. Oh, how he wanted to get to know them better. But that only scared him more. If he had dinner with them, their fans would kill him. So, he thought it best to reply. He had a lot to do now. At the very least, hire security. So when things calmed down and he had some free time, then he could think about dinner. Alessia replied, fine. Then they'll see each other when things get better for him, right? He agreed with that and thought, great, they'd agreed to the delay. All that remained was to find security as quickly as possible. But still, this was his first time sailing on his boat with someone, and he'd almost been denied boarding. In the future, he shouldn't forget to give everyone who comes on board permission. After a while, he exclaimed, there's the island in sight. They should be more careful. The shaking is about to get worse. And indeed, the boat rocked considerably on the waves for some time. Finally, he exhaled and said, they've arrived. When the girls disembarked, Alessia thanked him and told her crew to prepare to enter the forest. Kara remarked that they had a big errand today, so they had a lot of luggage. Dorothea, helping Clarette off the boat, remarked that the vessel was so fast. The priest agreed it was, and it wasn't shaking too much, which was very good. The protagonist thought happily. The Japanese boat was doing just fine. Indeed, he said out loud that if they wanted, he could make tea. Why don't they rest before leaving? Irma asked. Is he sure? She was so flattered. He thought, this woman is so attractive. After a while, Alessia thanked him for the tea and said, Well, they'll be back in 5 days. The protagonist asked them to be careful. He said goodbye to the girls and went ashore. Gyudo called out to him. He greeted the man and approached them. There were 2 more men near Gyudo. The carrier said he got there quickly. He then introduced his companions, Carlo and Daniel. The men waved hello. MC said he was looking forward to working with them. Gyudo remarked humorously, he was a lucky man. His first job, and right away with this group. He replied, oh yes, they are popular after all. The man agreed. That's right, they are A-rank adventurers, very strong, and after all, they are gorgeous to look at, right? He also gets nervous when working with them. The protagonist chuckled and thought, sounds like a fan club. Out loud, he said, by the way, he and his magical ship are currently under threat, so he needs to hire security. Gyudo replied, that's right, that happened to him too. Carlo noted that several dangerous people were hunting him, and once they almost managed to trick him. Gyudo said that he should listen carefully. He should not skimp on security. And also, all his assignments should be known to the merchant guild. If he took them in secret, there might be people who wanted to deceive him or cause him problems. He replied that he understood. After a while, the protagonist prepared the necessary ingredients for the fire and announced that he was free for the next 5 days. He needed to use the chicken bones he'd gotten for free at the market and try making chicken soup out of them. The seller was very surprised. Why did he need bones? Although he'd only seen this dish made once, and that was on TV. He didn't know if he could handle it. First, he filled the cauldron with water, using everyday magic, then washed the chicken bones. After that, he boiled the water. He thought that everyday magic really was very useful. When the water boiled, he needed to throw in the bones. When the bones were cooked, he noticed a piece of meat and said, maybe it should be boiled before washing. Just in case, he'd wash it again. And if you crumble the bones, the flavor will be more intense. Gyudo, watching him, noted with surprise that he was talking to himself while cooking. He was weird. The protagonist, oblivious to everyone, continued to voice his actions. Now he just needs to simmer on low heat. They'd apparently added chives on the air, but he thought it would do. Suddenly, his eye fell on some seaweed lying on the shore. Picking it up, he remarked in surprise, kelp? If it dries, it could be used for broth. Gyudo, perplexed, noted, now he's picking up all sorts of seaweed. He doesn't understand him. Then MC simply watched the soup and practiced with his weapon. And when he finished, he looked for a slime near the beach. When he found the monster, his joy knew no bounds. The protagonist sat down on the floor, placed the slime on his lap, and declared how cute it was. He thought, by the way, he still doesn't know how to get the tamer skill that allows you to talk to monsters. Why couldn't he just play with it and keep it for himself? Gyudo continued to watch it in bewilderment. Late that evening, lying on the bottom of the boat, he thought, this is how his first day on the island ended. After a while, he reflected on how the second, third, and fourth days had passed peacefully. He cooked, drank tea, played with slime, and saw his companions off. Left alone, the protagonist sat on the shore and thought about the calm sea. He wondered if he could build a cottage on the water and make it float with his skill. And on the 5th day, looking at the things he had collected, he said, excellent. He's ready to set sail. When will the group return? Before he could finish his thought, the girls came outside and announced they were back. A huge monster loomed over Kara's shoulders. Alessia, supporting the monster, told her friends to be careful not to drop it. Dorothea, supporting it from the other side, said, Claretta, more support magic. The priest closed her eyes and replied, she can't take it anymore. MC, completely confused, exclaimed, what? He rushed toward them, offering his help. Irma asked, really? Here, let him hold it then. Alessia, already exhausted from the weight, asked, please let him hold it. With a combined effort, the allies somehow managed to lower the monster to the bottom of the boat. After that, the girls sat down on the shore. Alessia said, she's so tired. The other girls' appearances suggested the same thing. The protagonist remarked, it's big, isn't it? The leader said, it's a subspecies of saber-toothed tiger. The customer wants to stuff it. He thought in surprise, wow, the pride of tough guys. He handed the girls the object and said, they can use this if they want. It's an oshibori. They asked in surprise, what is it? And what should they do with it? The protagonist explained, it's a towel soaked in hot water. They felt good wiping their faces and hands. The girls took his advice and were pleased. Dorothea had noticed, indeed, how pleasant it felt. Alessia said she'd taken a hot bath many times before, but this was quite refreshing, he said, and he'd also made dinner. Kara exclaimed joyfully, food! She wanted to eat. What happiness! MC served them chicken broth and vegetable soup and the bread Camilla had given him. Afterwards, he wished them bon appétit. He wondered what they would say. He'd been experimenting with this soup for 5 days, and now he was truly proud of himself. But what would they say? Marina said in surprise, it's simply delicious. Alessia also noticed, what is it? It's so delicious. Irma praised it. She'd never tried anything like it. He was delighted to hear such praise. Claretta said in surprise, even though the ingredients are only vegetables, she can taste the chicken. If it's not a secret, could he share the recipe? He sheepishly replied, okay, but it'll have to wait a bit. He was making soup to pass the time. The priest smiled and replied, okay, she wants to try it on her next vacation. MC couldn't believe it. Who would have thought they'd ask for his recipe? His soup was amazing. Everyone thanked him with smiles. He was so glad it worked out. He looked at a sad Kara and said, "He still has food." She immediately perked up at these words. He thought, great money and a vacation on the island. He should try to keep this job, even while he's hiding in the city. Alessia commanded, "They need to go back." Sailing on the boat, she remarked in surprise. She'd never thought of boiling chicken bones. How amazing. The protagonist was embarrassed and said, actually, it wasn't his idea. After a while, Marina exclaimed, "They're here." When the allies swam to shore, the girl's catch caught the attention of everyone on the shore. The adults were amazed. How could this be possible? They brought it from the southern island? How big is this tiger? What beautiful fur. The children cried out in admiration. It's a saber-toothed tiger. Kara said heartfeltly, "Wow, so many people." Dorothea noticed. They missed that. They should have at least covered it up somehow. The protagonist thought in confusion. He'd thought he'd be in low-class circles. This was definitely too ostentatious a port entrance. And so his first job as a merchant was successfully completed. But really, was it successful? His magical ship attracted the attention of many. After some time, he met a man who said with a smile, "It's nice to meet you. His name is Zabo, and he's a merchant." He'd heard he had a magnificent magical ship. Would he be interested in an exclusive agreement with him? MC declined, adding that all his work goes through the guild. He's asking him to leave. Then Ruta came to him and said he was from a shipping company. He was asking him to work with them. The protagonist also refused. A woman from the guild came next and asked how much they wanted to double the pay their organization was offering. The protagonist asked her to leave too. After that, another man also left empty-handed, promising to visit him later. The MC looked at his guards and asked how much longer they thought they'd bother him. Dino replied that he became famous thanks to the saber-toothed tiger. Does he think they'll forget that soon? Enrico added that the merchants won't give up so easily. The protagonist had indeed noticed. He thought that openly transporting the saber-toothed tiger had been a mistake. Apparently, only his boat could transport a monster of such size from the island. Since his arrival, merchants had been constantly breaking into his hotel room. Thanks to the guards, of course, he was able to get out, but the island was much safer, and he could earn more there. He couldn't wait for his next assignment. The protagonist arrived at the right place and addressed the old man. Camilla from the Merchant Guild advised him to come here. "Is the owner of this building here now?" Donino grunted in surprise and replied, "He is the owner of the building. What does he need?" He shouted, "Nice to meet you." After that, MC told the old man his name and said he needed a large, powerful raft. Could he make one like that? Donino asked in surprise. "A raft? Let him wait a minute." The old man descended from the large ship he was building and approached the protagonist. He showed the craftsman the diagram and said he would like the raft disassembled to assemble at the destination. About this size, the old man grunted in surprise and replied, "Okay. He'll do it for 70 silver coins." The protagonist thought in confusion, habitually converting into his own currency. That's a whole 700,000 yen. Quite a lot. But he mentioned Camille, so he shouldn't be robbed. He said out loud, "Good. And one more thing. He wants him to make him a wooden bathtub." 3 days later, the old man delivered his order. As he left, Donino said to assemble the raft. Let him simply connect logs with the same numbers. He thinks he can do it. MC thanked the old man and looked at the huge tied-together logs. He thought, they look heavy. Would he even be able to carry that? At that moment, Girasola's group approached him and greeted him joyfully. He smiled and said he was happy to work with their group members again. Irma replied, it would be their pleasure. She hoped he didn't mind them choosing his ship. After all, he must have had a hard time since his last return, right? He replied sheepishly, well, he'll figure it out somehow. After that, he told his guards he'd be back in 5 days. Thanks again. The guards replied, good, and wished him luck. With that, they said goodbye, and the ship sailed away. On the way, Claretta asked if he remembered telling her how to make bones soup. Well, she tried it, and it was delicious. The seaweed broth was also delicious. The protagonist replied that he was glad to hear it. This time, he'd dry some seaweed on the island again. She could take as much as she needed. The girl remarked in surprise, he's sure about that? Thank him so much? Dorothea, noticing the bundled logs floating behind the boat, asked what kind of wood it was. He exclaimed, it's a raft. He was thinking of making something on the island to spend time floating in the bay. Alessia clarified, something good? The protagonist asked her to be quiet and added that it was a secret. He wouldn't want to jinx it. Alessia became even more intrigued. What was this? So interesting to see. Irma admitted, yes, she couldn't wait to see it too. He thought sheepishly, now he definitely can't screw up. Sometime later, they arrived on the island. When the girls left, he was about to start cutting logs, but at that moment, Judo called out to him and asked what he needed all this wood for. MC greeted him and replied that he was thinking about building a raft here. The man was surprised. A raft? That's an interesting thought. He wants to build it now? Since he's here, he'll help him. The protagonist exclaimed in surprise, is that true? Judo remarked. Well, he's free anyway. Together, they set about assembling the raft. He thought about how putting the raft together was like putting together a puzzle, but still, there were such large pieces of wood here. He thought he couldn't have lifted something like this in Japan. His level had been steadily increasing since arriving in this world. He was now level 20. Apparently, it also boosted his strength and endurance. It seemed he'd been leveling up without even realizing it. After finishing the assembly, the allies ate and Yudo sailed home. The protagonist continued to refine his raft, and after a while, he exclaimed in admiration, he'd made a wonderful thing. A raft with a bathtub was ready. It was truly an amazing construction. A wooden bathtub stood in the middle of the raft, surrounded by curtains. MC said, he could have spent quite a bit, but he's Japanese, so he can't compromise on the bathtub. He swam away from the shore, noting whether it was far enough from shore. Afterward, he tossed hot stones into the bathtub, filled with the water of everyday magic. When everything was ready, he undressed and dipped his foot into the bathtub, exclaiming, perfect, comfortable, and warm. The protagonist immersed himself in it with pleasure and let out a sigh of bliss. He said, this is his first bath in another world. How wonderful. And the view of the ocean. It's simply perfect. He soaked in the tub for so long that day that he almost missed the girl's arrival. Alessia said they were back. He remarked that they were early this time. She agreed and added that they had obtained a lot of good materials, so they had returned early. Irma added, she's also very interested in his secret raft. The protagonist looked at them mysteriously and said, well, now he'll show them everything. Let them climb into the boat. He pulled them up to the raft and exclaimed, he's made a bath, Dorothea said in confusion. Amazing. She's seen a bath for the first time in her life. He wondered in surprise. What was she talking about? Alessia had noticed, and it was true. She thought only aristocrats and rich merchants could afford such a thing. The protagonist was very surprised. He thought, so people like Dorothea can't afford a bath? Does that mean they'll be taking one for the first time in their lives? That sounds more than interesting. He said out loud, it feels wonderful. It's a great way to relieve fatigue, so they shouldn't be afraid to try. Alessia laughed and remarked, she's sure it will be fun. Who will go first? Kara raised her hand and said, she's a bit afraid, so she'll probably refuse. Claretta also sounded doubtful. She was also nervous for some reason. He was simply amazed. What were they saying? Fear of taking a bath? What an unexpected reaction. The leader said, okay, Kara and Claretta will wait, and everyone else will take turns. Everyone agreed with her decision. The protagonist said, then he'll set sail. If they need anything, they should call him. That's what they agreed on. The girls were talking. The protagonist said to enter without clothes, right? He said to wash their skin first. The girls took a bath and stood hesitantly in place. Irma asked who wanted to go first. Alessia, having made up her mind, exclaimed, she'll go. Desperately, she stepped into the bath, and her wariness immediately vanished. The girls asked, well, how is it? She exclaimed delightedly. How nice. MC, having swum to a safe distance, turned around and looked at the raft. He thought, they must be having fun there. He was glad about that. Claretta and Kara returned with him to the shore. Tank asked if taking a bath was really that good. He looked at her and noticed that they both looked very worried, so he answered, it is. He knows there are people who don't like it, but not taking a bath would be a great loss in life. And of course, they won't die if they don't. It becomes more pleasant if you just put your feet in, let them calm down. Claretta noted, she thinks he's right. If only they try a little. Kara agreed with her. At that moment, the girls from the raft shouted that they were already finished. He shouted back that he was on his way to get them. Turning to Kara and Claretta, he asked, are they coming? The girls, determined, answered yes. He pulled them to the raft. Claretta suggested that her friend put her feet in first. On the count of 3, they both put their feet in at once. 30 minutes later, when everyone had gathered on the shore, Claretta said admiringly, it was so nice. Kara's whole demeanor confirmed that her friend was right. The protagonist clarified, really, it's just wonderful. Alessia remarked, she doesn't feel tired at all. It's so magnificent. Dorothea added, the bath is simply wonderful. The protagonist was touched by the gorgeous view. He couldn't believe he was able to see such beauties after the bath. He has the best life. Irma looked at him intently. He caught himself and silently thanked her for the food. The girl winked at him languidly. But while he was enjoying himself on the island, something less pleasant was happening in the city. Camila burst into the chief's office like a whirlwind, shouting, they're in trouble. Wataru is being accused of theft. When the allies arrived at the pier, MC exclaimed, they've arrived. It was good work. Dorothea remarked that it looked like they'd gotten a lot of useful materials this time. Irma added, and the bath was absolutely gorgeous. Kara thanked him with a smile. Alessia said they'd walk him to the guild. He sheepishly but happily replied, if it's not too much trouble, of course. As the whole group strolled down the city street, everyone looked at them, some with surprise, some with admiration, and some with envy. The protagonist thought sheepishly that he didn't want to attract attention, but among such a group of beautiful girls, that was simply impossible. At this rate, the fans of this group would tear his head off. When they reached the guild, he said he thought his guards would be here any minute. Thanks to them for seeing him off. Alessia replied, not to worry about that. If he needed anything, be it bath materials or good food, he should just ask them. It was the least they could do to repay him. They looked forward to working with him again. He smiled and replied, so did he. He thought, it seemed like everyone really enjoyed the bath. They were happy, and he was glad to see beautiful women like this. The raft seemed pretty sturdy, so maybe he should check if it was sleepable. He just needed to add a tent and a table, and then it could be considered glamping. It would probably be great. At that moment, Camilla called out to him and said they had a problem. Before he could respond, 3 men approached him. and one of them rudely asked, "Isn't he Wataru? He's under arrest on suspicion of stealing the Zabo family's magical ship," he exclaimed in bewilderment. "What? Why is he under arrest?" Camilla stepped forward and asked them to wait a minute. The man rudely shouted, "Silence!" He turned to the two guards who had come with him and ordered the protagonist's arrest. The guards rushed toward him, but were immediately subdued by the protagonist's guards. Dino asked if he was okay. Enrico told the guards he couldn't let them do this. "By the way, they don't have an arrest warrant yet, right?" MC, surprised, called out his guards by name. At that moment, the head of the trading guild appeared and said, "Enrico is absolutely right." The protagonist was completely confused upon seeing the man. The head continued, addressing those who had arrived. "None of them have any evidence yet for this accusation. He wouldn't let them do this. Now, let them go back where they came from." The protagonist thought in confusion. They wanted to arrest him? What the hell is going on here? When things calmed down, the leader told him everything. In the end, he said something like this. "The merchant Zabo claims his ship is a stolen family heirloom. Does he know him?" The MC replied, confused. He didn't think so. He didn't remember seeing this man before. Was he sure he hadn't mistaken him for someone else? He thought in bewilderment. It couldn't be that he stole it, because the ship he now has is a Japanese ship made by a Japanese manufacturer. He's completely out of this world. Enrico pointed out that if he wasn't mistaken, Zabo was one of those merchants who came to ask about the contract, right? The protagonist gasped. "It can't be." The leader said, "That's what he thinks. He knows Zabo, a petty scoundrel with a bad reputation." The protagonist exclaimed in confusion. "Does that mean he's trying to tell me this man is trying to take his ship because he refused to sign a contract with him? How could he be so reckless?" The leader replied that such an approach usually doesn't work anyway, but Zabo has the support of a nobleman named Benvenuto, a baron. If he takes action, the officials won't be able to ignore it. MC asked, confused, what should he do now? The leader said to challenge him to a trial. He looked at the man in bewilderment. What was he talking about? The leader added that if this really happens, they'll have to go to court. Sometime later, the protagonist found himself in court in another world. Sitting in front of the boat he brought with him, looking at the judge and the man standing next to him, he thought he might cry. Turning his head, he saw Zabo and thought, so that's what he's like. He thought he'd actually seen him somewhere before. Then he looked at the judge again and noted, this guy really is the arbiter of fate? And the other people, the court observers, they were whispering. The man standing next to the judge's throne said, they will now discuss the theft of a magical ship in connection with a lawsuit filed by the merchant Zabo. And since a representative of the southern county is present today, any disrespect is unacceptable. The protagonist thought in surprise, a count from the south? So this is the guy he thought was the judge. Could he really be such a great man? The judge continued, turning to him. Well, does he have anything to say against Zabo's lawsuit? MC replied, yes, he didn't steal that ship. He paid for it properly out of his own pocket. Zabo, crying for emphasis, interrupted him and said, that's a complete lie. This magical ship is a family heirloom. It's a very valuable ship. Baron Benvenuto got his start with it. The Baron had made a pompous point. That's true. It was several years ago, but there's no mistaking the ship for Zabo. The protagonist thought regretfully, how could a nobleman be involved in such a lie? The judge asked if he had any objections. The protagonist said he did. Words are great and all, but if he allows it, he'd like to use this magical ship to prove his point. The count replied, of course he doesn't mind. MC noted with surprise that the southern count had spoken. He didn't seem like a bad nobleman. He thanked the man out loud and thought, well, now it's time for the climax. He turned to Zabo and said, in that case, could he launch this magical ship? The merchant casually replied, okay. The protagonist continued, since it's supposed to be his ship, he should be able to launch it, right? Zabo laughed and said, of course. He thought there were several ways to launch this ship, but they all involved channeling magic into parts of the ship. Did he think he knew that? The protagonist activated landing permission. The merchant took the helm and said, okay. Then, if they let him, he'll get started. MC wondered in confusion. Why is this guy trying so hard? Zabo hadn't succeeded in starting the ship on his first try. He smiled stupidly and said ingratiatingly, it's his fault. That was so long ago. The merchant began running around the boat, trying to launch the vessel from anywhere, but he was having trouble. Benvenuto irritably remarked, what is he doing? He should hurry up and launch the ship. The protagonist gloomily wished them luck. Clutching the ignition key, he thought, no matter how much magic this merchant channels, the boat won't start, because this ship isn't magical. It only works with the ignition key. Zabo looked foolish in his attempts. He said, confused, this is strange. The protagonist looked at the southern count and the judge and noted, now it's up to them and the others. The merchant looked at the judge and whined, the ship is broken. MC took the helm and started the engine with ease. Zabo looked at him in confusion. The onlookers said in surprise, the ship started. It's so noisy. Zabo, confused, shouted to the judge, this must be some kind of trick. The southern count extended his hand and abruptly declared, enough. Everyone looked at him in amazement. The judge said they found Zabo's statement false. The protagonist exhaled with relief and placed his hand on his chest, paying his respects to the judge and the count. The Lord of Fates turned to the merchant and the baron, exasperatedly saying, How dare they use false accusations to try to steal a magical ship from someone else? Such things cannot be taken lightly. Zabo, swallowing nervously, replied, "This is some kind of misunderstanding." The judge continued, "Let them think about the other townspeople they will have to answer to. They will thoroughly question everyone and conduct an investigation. So let him not give them any more dirty excuses." The court session is declared closed. The Baron, having assessed the entire situation, sighed heavily and resignedly. Leaving the courtroom, the protagonist spread his arms and exclaimed, "He won." The head said he did well. MC remarked in surprise, "He's here?" Yes, he was a little surprised too, especially when the Count from the south appeared. The leader laughed and said, "He did it. He was the one who asked him to come to the hearing." The protagonist exclaimed in bewilderment, "What did he do? He really is an important person." The old man remarked with a smile, "Well, yes, that's how he is." Camilla added with a smile, "The thing is, the Southern Count knew that both Zabo and the Baron were scoundrels and were up to no good. Therefore he thought the trial would be a good time to catch them red-handed and punish them properly." The protagonist said with a smile, "That's it. He wanted to catch them as soon as possible." At that moment, observers emerged from the courthouse and he heard them raving about the hearing. The man said, "That trial was just so exciting. It was a joy to behold." The woman remarked, "That's right. Zabo had such an expression on his face, and her shop will finally be able to operate in peace." The MC was pleased with what he heard. He thought it was difficult, but he'd defeated the bad guys. Now the case is closed. Finally, he can live in peace, or so he thought. After all, the city hasn't changed a bit. Agitation, corruption, and robbery are still rampant. He spends his life leaving the city, taking orders, and heading to the island. Once out to sea, he was surprised to see that Gyudo and the others had also begun building their own rafts, so the island was now looking more and more like a resort. As for his work, he made friends with guys from other groups besides Girasoli. He also improved his culinary skills, and one day, he surprised everyone with a dish called karaj. It was a success. Everyone loved it. And so 6 months passed. When the protagonist glanced at his guild card, his amazement knew no bounds. Somehow, his guild card balance had grown by 4 white gold coins, 68 gold coins, and 80 silver coins. He calculated and exclaimed in surprise, "That's over 740 million yen." He was simply fabulously rich. Later, lying on his bed, he said, but to buy a luxury liner, he'd need at least 50 billion yen. Even at this rate, it would take him over 50 years to earn that much money. After some thought, he walked to the window, looked out at the horizon, and declared, if that's the case, then his next goal would be to travel to the continent beyond the sea. Selecting a cruise ship from the store menu, he decided to buy himself a new vessel and try to strike a deal with the southern continent, reincarnating in another world with the skill of summoning ships. A classic trope in fantasy, so reminiscent of the Middle Ages. Perhaps, if the trade route from the southern continent could be restored, it would be possible. A journey that takes a month on a magic ship can make a lot of money, so which ship should he choose? After some time, he took the girls from the Girasoli group back to the island. While waiting, consulting the traveler's map, MC noted that the southern islands would be a long journey to the southern continent, so he needed a ship with a wide stern. Camilla said that there are large monsters in the open sea. The percentage of ships that manage to return safely from the southern continent is 1 in 30. She also added excitedly that she wouldn't want him to go there. He was pleased by her concern, but he knew his ship was unsinkable and indestructible, so he thought everything would be fine. Still, he was glad she was so concerned about him. Suddenly, Gyudo approached him and greeted him. He was holding a mug of alcohol. The protagonist noted in surprise, "He's been drinking since this morning? That's bad. He does sometimes leave the ship in emergency situations, after all." The man replied, "Just 1 sip. So what about the map? Are they heading to the southern continent?" He replied, "Yes." Gyudo remarked, "It's dangerous. Are they short of money?" The protagonist replied, "No." He thought it would be nice to trade because he wanted a good magical ship for himself. He mentally noted that if a god hadn't pressured him, he would never have gone there. The man said, perplexed. As far as he knew, the southern continent wasn't safe. "What about an escort?" he repeated in surprise. "An escort?" He wanted to answer that he couldn't take the 2 of them to the southern continent, or rather, he hated traveling at sea in the company of their 3 men. Gyudo suggested, "Why don't they take the opportunity and buy slaves?" Seeing his puzzled expression, he added, "Don't worry about betrayal. There aren't many people actually capable of that." MC thought, confused. Slaves. As far as he could tell, it was normal in this world. But he never imagined he'd buy them himself. Or rather, if a person usually ends up in another world, wouldn't a fateful encounter await them there? Isn't that why some beautiful girl protects a person, and it later blossoms into a love affair? That's all he knows about another world. Gyudo, looking at him carefully, asked, "Is everything all right?" The protagonist replied, "Yes, he was just thinking." The man advised him not to overdo it. At that moment, Alessia called out to him and announced they were back. This time, they were carrying a large monster again. Sometime later, late that evening, Kara, over dinner, tearfully exclaimed, "Are they sure they need to go to the southern continent? She can't eat fried chicken anymore." Claretta, looking at him sadly, asked him to be careful. He replied, yes, he understood. Even though he was prepared, he would still be careful. Alessia looked around, glanced at the raft, and said, thanks to it, this island really has become cozy, right? Irma answered, exactly. That's why they have a gift prepared for him. He was surprised. A gift? Marina handed him a slime. Dorothea let out a cry of surprise. The scout said, they found this yesterday in the forest. The deputy leader added, this baby is a newborn holy slime. It's a very rare species. The protagonist joyfully exclaimed how cute it was. And is it sparkling? Or is it glowing like that? It looks like platinum. Can he touch it? The girls stared at him in amazement. They had never seen him so touched. He took the slime in his hands and looked at it with admiration. Dorothea smiled and remarked, they're glad he's happy. He carefully placed the monster on the table and thought how cute the little guy was. He could travel with him if he had the taming skill. MC asked if he could give him some dried meat, and the slime ate it. The protagonist stared at him in surprise because the monster started making noises while eating the meat. He was completely shocked and said, that's just impossible. A slime is talking. Alessia countered, slimes don't talk. He replied, he knows that, but it seems like this little guy is talking to him. Claretta looked puzzled. Maybe he's developed some kind of skill? MC said, exactly. I need to check. The information showed that he had language comprehension, level 1 spear skills, and level 1 taming skills. He happily grabbed the slime and exclaimed, so that's it. Those are taming skills, so he can handle a slime, right? There were so many people there who had interacted with these monsters in huge numbers. Irma remarked in surprise, that's amazing. However, in order to bring a slime into the city, a servant's contact was necessary. She knew a thing or two about this procedure, so she would teach him. He happily agreed to her proposal. The girl said that first, she would draw a magical command for the contract. Having done this right on the table, she placed the slime on it and added that if this little one enters this circle, the deed will be done, so let him talk to it and persuade it to do so. The protagonist leaned towards the slime and, addressing it as a holy slime, asked if it would enter into a servant contract with him. If it agreed, please let it enter this magical command. It understands, right? The protagonist closed his eyes in anticipation, thinking that if this doesn't work, tomorrow, this little guy will return to the forest again, and he needn't worry about it. Opening his eyes, he looked at the slime, who stood there. Suddenly, the monster answered, he's coming. The MC was touched. How touching. The slime expressed its love, and the system announced that a contract had been concluded. The protagonist, confused, said, oh my god, the contract is concluded. The slime has agreed. All the girls on the team were sincerely happy for him, congratulating him on this occasion. Sometime later, returning to the city, he thought about how a servant contract is like a confession. But few attach importance to such an element as affection in this world. And then he brought his familiar to the guild. Camila, handing him the guild card, said with a smile, so this is a holy slime. Here's his servant registration. It's a very rare species, so he should try to avoid being taken away. He noted with surprise, and one more thing. He needs to buy a new magic ship. Can he withdraw platinum coins? The girl remarked with surprise. I see. If the number of platinum coins doesn't exceed 10, they can make it today. She added sadly, so he did decide to trade on the pepper trade route after all. He noted with chagrin. It seemed he had upset her. Out loud he exclaimed, everything will be fine. His new ship will be even better than the last one. Camilla replied that she was worried, but there was nothing she could do about it, because the guild had no right to stop it. But as an envoy, he was simply wonderful. He could always buy a ship from the merchant guild, so if anything happened, he should just let the seller know. He looked at her in surprise, and then said that he understood everything. He thought Camilla was so sensitive about business matters. After all, she was an employee of the merchant guild. The girl asked if there was anything else she could help him with. The protagonist said yes. To be honest, he'd like her to introduce him to the slave trader. Sometime later, he arrived at a beautiful mansion with his guards. Showing the slime the furnishings, he said, this is the lobby. Dino remarked, it looks like a luxury store. MC asked the slime if it wanted to jump into the bag, and it agreed. They were met by a pleasant male servant who greeted him politely and with a smile, inviting them in. In the office, an important-looking man greeted them and said it was a pleasure to meet him. His name was Duccio, and he was the manager of this trading house. He understands that his guest wants to find slaves to accompany him. The protagonist replied, surprised, yes, that's right. Duccio remarked, good, he understood. But first, he wanted to explain the peculiarities of slaves. First of all, slaves are so-called debt slaves, who have sold themselves as a debt. There are also criminal slaves, who have committed serious crimes and are enslaved as punishment. Criminal slaves are engaged in forced labor, so in his case, he should look specifically for debt slaves. They have their own rules. The master's rules prohibit killing slaves, violence against slaves, and forcing them to commit crimes. They are also guaranteed minimal food, clothing, and housing. The slave's rules state absolute obedience to the master, no escapes, and absolute secrecy. Let him note that the slave contract is concluded with the assistance and under the supervision of the god of trade and business. Violation of these rules is punished by the gods. The surprised MC drawled, he understood everything. He thought, God's punishment is truly an amazing thing, but in this world, there really are gods, so slaves are properly protected. Duccio said, as a representative of the merchant guild, that he could provide him with most of their store. However, it might be more expensive. He asked how much. The manager said 30 gold coins for one slave. The protagonist thought in confusion. That was 3 million yen. He didn't know the market price, of course, but that wasn't something he could afford. That was quite a lot of money. He said out loud that he would like to see the slaves. Duccio smiled and readily answered whenever he wished. He was sure he would like them. These two were his pride, he thought in bewilderment. Two? The servant opened the door, and two girls entered the office. Duccio introduced them, Ines of the Fire Tiger tribe, and Felicia of the Dark Elf tribe. The protagonist was dumbfounded, looking at these beauties. What would he say about them? Did he like them? He agreed with a confused tone and thought that they were both quite beautiful. It would be great if people like them could accompany them. He called him and asked, "They are indeed beautiful, but 30 gold coins. It seems there are many people who are willing to give this amount." Duccio said with a smile that this is true. These two have many merits, so they have the right to choose their master. Many of his clients failed in these negotiations. Wataru was surprised by this and thought, in other words, it is not about money? How did they get here anyway? He said that the negotiations will be between him and the slaves. Would he like to try to talk to them? He agreed with a confused look and thought that he cannot miss this chance. It will be a miracle to take even one. He stood up from his seat and said that he can do as he wishes, and then they will leave. A barrier of the god of commerce has been erected in this room, and the conversation inside is kept secret. In such cases, it is usually customary to show each other status, power, and skills. He left the room and wished him luck. Left alone with them, he wondered what he should appeal to in conversation. Maybe reveal his secret to them and say that he is from another world? No, they will just find him strange. It's time to say something. He introduced himself and said that it was nice to meet them. Could they also introduce themselves and show their status? They both introduced themselves and opened their status windows in front of him, where information about them was written. He looked at the Ines system window with a surprised expression and thought that these were clearly tiger ears. There are a total of 5 mastery levels, so the third is an advanced class of fire magic, and she seems to be strong in it. He looked at the Felicia system window and thought that she is 62 years old. Is this normal for dark elves? Is barrier magic defensive magic or not? If so, then he will be saved. He apologized and asked if he could find out how they became slaves. Ines said casually with a smile that she had gambled away her money and sold herself into debt. A common situation for her. Felicia said with a sad expression that she had sold herself for the lives of villagers who were being attacked by inhuman hunters. She sat down on a chair and calmly said that she was originally a rank B adventurer. Usually, she could always pay off her debts, but this time, she didn't make it before the deadline because she was injured in the dungeon. She got into a lot of debt and sold herself. However, she doesn't want to give up gambling, so she's hoping for a very generous master. She also wants to be someone who is fed delicious food and given many pleasant experiences. He thought with a worried look that although she looked strong, he had no choice but to trust his life to someone else. Felicia said that she was the daughter of the Dark Elf village chief. The village was attacked by troops from a human supremacist country, who forced them into slavery and took it away. They say they are a good race, which is why so many deals are made with them. He asked with a surprised expression, does such a country really exist? She agreed and said that it was a country with little discrimination against other races. Their country is huge, so they did not have enough strength to protect the village. She had a favor to ask of him. Could he please find a safe haven for them? The Dark Elves? Then she could devote herself to serving him. He thought with a thoughtful expression that it was a great responsibility, but if they explored the open sea by boat, they might find uninhabited islands where they could live. But this was still only a possibility. He thought that Ines would have the opportunity to board a luxury liner. Would it be convenient for the creator god to invest? She said in a sad voice that in the end it was impossible. The protagonist asked her to wait and said that perhaps he could fulfill her wish. How about we take a look at his unique skill? He used the ship's summoning skill and summoned a small boat in the middle of the room. Felicia looked at it and asked, is this summoning magic? She came closer and said that this ship was strange. She hit her head on the barrier and said in surprise that it hit her. She stood nearby and asked, is this the barrier? He agreed and said that with his unique skill, he could summon a ship that couldn't sink, crash, or be captured. They could also try hitting it. She immediately raised her hand, created a magic circle, and said that she would test it then. She waved her hand and sent a stream of magical flames at his boat. When the dust from her attack settled, she saw that the boat was unharmed and said that it turned out to be true. Although it was hard to believe. He thought that this attack was more powerful than he could have thought. He said that soon he was going to buy a bigger ship with the same power and go to the southern continent. So they would trade and look for uninhabited islands, and if they did find one, It seemed he could help her with the migration. This interested Felicia, and he approached Ines, opened the system window and said that now she should look here. If their negotiations were successful, he was going to buy this luxury liner. She was surprised by what she saw and asked, "Is this really a ship?" He said that this ship was more like a city, and there were many shops there. She would also be able to enjoy drinks and food in the casino. She said with an admiring expression that this was her dream. "Is this really possible?" He agreed and said that he was ready to swear by the name of the god of business. She was shocked and said that it was breathtaking. However, this ship costs 500 platinum coins, right? Will he be able to buy it? He agreed and said that it was true. It seemed it would take some time. She thought about it, and he bowed and said that his ship is unsinkable and indestructible, but he himself is very weak, so he needs someone who can protect him. So he asks them about it. They looked at each other with a thoughtful look and said, "I see." Then she does not mind becoming his slave. She also asks him to accept her. He was surprised by this and thanked them loudly. After that, they went outside. Ines called him master, took his hand, and said that she asks him to take care of her. He was very confused by this and loudly agreed. Felicia was confused by this and said that she did not care how he would address her. She asked the master to take care of her village. He, with a confused look, said that he will not neglect her. She said that, however, she nevertheless asks to allow her to call him master. A few weeks later, MC thought that after that, they accompanied him all the time in the city. At that time, he was busy preparing for the journey. After that, they set sail. Ines looked at the system window and asked, "Can he really buy a ship with this?" He put money in the system window and said that unique skills were so strange. He bought a new ship and used the ship's summon skill. A new ship appeared next to his boat, and the system announced that it was a cruiser with a capacity limit of 15 people and special features, unsinkable and indestructible. They climbed on board, were surprised to see it, and said that it was amazing and wonderful. It really was a magical ship. He said that this ship was called a cruiser. Felicia asked, "Cruiser is the name of the ship?" He thought with a thoughtful look. "Is it some kind of family name?" He would like the name to be fantastic. He came up with a name and said that they would call this ship Cray. Now they were heading to the southern continent. He camouflaged the ship and sailed to the bay. Camilla saw this and asked, "So this is his new ship? It's kind of strange." He asked in a confused tone, "Does she really think so?" She saw this type of ship for the first time and asked where he found it. He didn't know what to answer. Turned to Ines and quietly asked, "Is it even possible to find such a magical ship?" She didn't know this and asked, "Probably not." He realized that she didn't know and thought that he knew that many people talk about magical ships as something unknown, and you shouldn't get too carried away. Wataru called her and asked what fabric she was talking about not long ago. She said with a happy expression that she was talking about spider silk. She had already calculated that for 50 pieces, you can get 1 platinum coin. On the southern continent, it will be worth even more. Although he will be able to use this money, everything will depend on the political situation. However, it seems to her that he will have no problem buying it with either goods or money. He thanked her for her cooperation, and she said that everything was fine. It was only natural that he would be able to supply their goods in bulk. She asked him to take more goods and return safely. He agreed with a happy expression and said that he would try. He looked to the side and noticed Enrico and Dean waving at him and said that he should be careful there. He thanked them and said that they were leaving. After that, he set sail and thought that this was the beginning of a new month-long journey. He had just bought a new ship, so his membrane level had risen by 3 levels. Now there was an autopilot option. Although it was limited by water, one could set the place where he had been before. This way, one could sleep peacefully while the ship headed towards its destination. However, first, he had to reach the destination on his own, and he should try. They continued sailing for some time. One day, they called the gentleman and asked if they could offer him some tea. The protagonist sat down with them at the table and asked how they felt on the ship. Ines said that they had already expressed their admiration for his ship. Why was he asking this? He remembered this, apologized, and said that he was simply not used to it yet. Maybe they had not figured out how the ship worked, how and what to use? Felicia said that if you think about it, they didn't know how it worked, but they soon figured it out, so she thinks everything will be fine. She was very surprised by the shower and the microwave. She said that it was all so strange and didn't look like magic at all. He said that originally this ship was from a world where there was no magic, but the supplies of fresh water and fuel never ran out. Could this be because of magic? They were surprised by what they heard and asked, "Did he say a world without magic?" He was confused by this, apologized, and said that he was always talking nonsense. Right, have they seen the bed? It really is luxurious. They agreed and said that it was very soft and comfortable. It is also fluffy and nice. He said that was good. They had 3 bedrooms, so they could take one each. They were a little surprised by this and asked, wouldn't they sleep together? She accompanies her master, so she wants to guard him at night too. He was surprised by this and thought about it. These 2 really do accompany him. But should they sleep in the same bed? He imagined it and said that for sure, sleeping in the same bed would be safer. They looked at him and said that it was written all over his face. He started to leave and said that he suddenly had motivation. He should think it over. He looked to the side and said that some bubbles appeared on the water's surface. Ines came up to him, also saw it and asked, maybe it was some kind of gas? or was it the breath of a living creature? At that moment, a large monster emerged from the water and let out a loud roar. They were surprised by this, called it a sea serpent, and it opened its mouth wide and headed to attack them. However, he collided with the barrier, and she said loudly and admiringly that it was cool, and he hit the barrier. He looked at it with a frightened look and said that he would attack again. How could they defeat such a monster? She said that she had never fought him, but they should try. She would now take the magic wand. Felicia had already returned to them, tossed her the magic wand, and said that she had already brought it. She also called the master and tossed him a bow. Inez caught it, thanked him, and said that she was quite quick. He was confused because he was also given a weapon, and she said that before they attacked, she would like him to strike too. When they defeat this monster, their levels will increase together. MC understood her, called Lizzie and said that they should attack. He is level 1. So he is guaranteed to level up. He started aiming and thought that he was big, so he definitely wouldn't miss. He hit the monster's head with an arrow, it flew to the side, and he asked, "Is that really okay?" She said that would be enough. Now Lizzie needs to strike too. He spat at the sea serpent and said that he would destroy it. He happily picked it up and said that it was amazing, an excellent strike. Inez happily took the magic wand in her hand and said that great, now it's her turn. She is going to show him the most destructive magic. Felicia walked up to her. They both created magic circles and loudly said that she would attack at the same time as her. She agreed. They counted to 3 and simultaneously attacked the monster. This attack was enough to defeat the sea serpent. They were all very happy about this. He opened the system window and said that it was amazing. His level had risen to 25. Lizzie is now level 32. Inez said she also leveled up by 7. Felicia said she leveled up by 5. As expected, it was a strong opponent, and if it weren't for the ship, they wouldn't have managed it. When they level up, the body becomes stronger, which increases lifespan. Legends speak of level 700 heroes who lived for millennia. He was surprised by this and said that he was hearing about it for the first time. They looked at each other in confusion, called the master and asked if they could ask him a question. He agreed, and they asked, "The master is not from this world. How is that, and where is he from?" He was surprised by this and asked in a shocked tone, "How did they know?" They were surprised by this and said that it turned out to be true. Amazing. He's not good at hiding it. There's no common sense in his words. And if you think about it, he knows how to operate this strange ship. Is the world without magic he spoke of a completely different dimension? He said that one could say that since they already figured it out. However, they must keep the fact that he is from another world a secret from the others. This is his order as their master. They agreed and said that from now on he should not hide anything from them. It is so interesting when her master is from another world. After that, they continued their journey, and everything went wonderful. On the 25th day, he saw land and thought that they had finally reached the southern continent. He called them and said that the southern continent was right in front of them. They looked at it and said that indeed, she could see it clearly. They really had arrived. He said that they had arrived in 25 days, 5 days earlier than planned. They should go closer and find a place where people lived. Inez, looking a little worried, asked him to wait. She said that they didn't know the language of this continent after all. He, with a surprised expression on his face, said that this was indeed so. She was shocked by this and asked if he hadn't even thought of that. He said with a worried look that they had always been in the same country. What should they do now? Felicia called him and asked what language he spoke in another world. He said with a surprised look that he did have a unique skill of understanding languages. They were surprised by this and said that it was an excellent skill. He had no reason to worry so much. After that, they went on a boat to the shore and simultaneously descended to the ground. She began to use magic and said that she would use her barrier magic on him. This would prevent any attack on him. He thanked her, and Inez went further and said that this was such a small village. He said that they would not conduct trade here. He should ask someone where the city was. Wataru saw a man walking down the street, greeted him, introduced himself as a traveling merchant, and asked if he could talk to him. After that, they were brought into a building. Residents crowded around and asked, "Did they hear? These are aliens from the northern continent." The old man said he was glad to meet them. His name was Krauko, and he was the headman of this village. They really were from the northern continent, if they had such a powerful ship. He thought it was surprising that they were watching them. He agreed in a confused tone, gave his name, introduced himself as a traveling merchant, and said that he was pleased to meet them. He had come here to trade. Could he tell him about a large port city nearby? He said that if we talk about port cities, if you go west, then 10 days walk from here there is a city called Tibori. However, in Catania, the king died 2 months ago, and there's a battle for the succession. He was surprised by what he heard and asked if they were talking about a civil war. He said that so far there had been no open armed conflict, but security in Tibori was deteriorating every day. The protagonist, looking worried, asked if he could find out more about what happened. He agreed and said that he heard it from a merchant he knew. The king died suddenly, and those who are now fighting for power are the first and second princes. He listened carefully and thought that the first prince's mother was his legal wife and came from another country. On the other hand, the second prince's mother was a concubine and also the prime minister's daughter. The prime minister also said that the first prince was not worthy of his crown and that the second prince should become king. Krauko said that both princes were gathering troops and that more and more mercenaries and other bandits were gathering in Tabori every day. If he was going to the city, he should be extremely careful. After some time, they returned to the ship and he asked if it was clear how things were now and what they should do. Felicia said that if she thought about it, if there was any danger, they could definitely handle it. Why don't they just go there and see everything with their own eyes? Ines agreed and said that they had come so far that they simply had to go. She said that if absolutely necessary, they could escape to his ship. He said that's what they would do. He couldn't decide anything until he saw what was there. They were delighted by this, and she asked how about a drink to celebrate this event. She forbade it, and a few days later they came to the city. Felicia called the gentleman and said that she saw the city. He looked at it with admiration and said, "What a big city it is." She followed him with a tired look and said that she would not mind waiting out this heat on the ship for a while. Later they entered the city, came to the market and began to look around. He said with surprise that for some reason everything here looks quite peaceful. Several men approached them and said that these girls are wearing foreign clothes. How about going with them, and not this idiot? MC, looking worried, thought that he had somehow managed to fall into this pattern. Now he had run into bad guys. He said that these two were his guards. They refused. The man indignantly loudly called him an idiot and said that they did not ask him. They asked the owner with a calm expression and asked if they should finish with them. Can they start fighting them? He agreed. The man ran towards them and loudly said that he should move away from the girls and disappear. However, Felicia caught his fist and slammed his head on the ground. The second man was confused by what happened, but Inez ran up to him and delivered a strong kick to the head. The third man took out a sword and loudly said that they had played too much. He looked at this with a worried look and loudly said that he had a sword. Felicia waved her magic wand and created a magic circle around them, and lightning struck near them. The men looked at this with a worried look and said that they had magic. They better not fight them. The guards came to them and loudly asked what they were doing there. The men started running away, and Waters said that this would cause them a lot of trouble. They should get out of here. After some time, they ran away, hid in an alley, and said that it seemed like no one was following them. Still, what did those bad guys want to do? He said that the shops were still open, so he could stock up on pepper, right? Camila said that there was a guild on this continent too, so they should look for it. They came to a merchant. He apologized and asked if he could ask him for directions. The man said that he did not answer questions for free. He handed him a coin and asked if he only had foreign coins right now. Would this do? He took it and said that this would do too. He pointed to the side and said that to get to the merchant guild, they had to go through this underground passage. They went to an alley where different people said that to go through this path, he had to pay a toll. It's dark inside. How about a lamp for only 10 coins? Do they want him to show them the way for a symbolic 50 coins? How about traditional clothes? They should try their delicious juice. He has the cheapest clothes. He quickly walked forward and said loudly that they didn't need anything. The girls called him and asked if they could ask him something. What were they talking about? If they buy one thing from them, nothing will spoil. They passed through an alley and he said that they had to run. A girl approached them, held out a flower, and Felicia turned, took it and said, "What a beautiful flower. Thank her." He called her with a worried look, and she said with a smile that it would cost 10 coins. He paid the money, and she, with a worried look, said that she was very sorry. 2 hours later, they were finally able to reach the trading guild. They went inside. The protagonist apologized and asked, "They came from the northern continent? They can talk to the guild?" The worker was surprised by this and said that they should wait a little. They met a girl who said with surprise that she was very glad to have their customers from the northern continent. Her name is Mary. She is the deputy head of this guild. He was surprised by her beauty, introduced himself in an excited tone, and said that he was pleased to meet her. She reciprocated and asked, she understood that they came from the north to buy pepper from them, right? He agreed and asked, however, it seems that their political situation is not the easiest. Will they be able to make a deal? She said that it means they know about the struggle for the throne. The lord of their city is a supporter of the first prince and he is still gathering troops. To be honest, an armed conflict is only a matter of time. He said with a worried look that it really looks like a civil war is brewing. She said that he should not worry. Buying pepper would be a good deal. The pepper sale starts right now. Preparing for a civil war, the princes want to turn pepper into money as soon as possible. Now it is half the price of usual. He will be able to buy it for half the price. He admired this and wondered, is this normal for her? Ines called him and asked, everything is fine, right? He agreed and said that they would buy pepper. Mary asked, so what was their budget? MC said that they had 2 platinum coins in cash. They also brought spider silk, which they would like to sell wholesale. She admired this and said that he was a very lucky man. When the war starts, expensive things will go out of stock. He will still be able to buy everything he needs from their guild. The prices are not higher than the market. But that doesn't bother him, does it? Everything is okay? Then she would like to check the spider silk tomorrow. Has he already decided on the hotel? She will help him with the choice. He needs money for expenses. What about a change of clothes? Does he have a guide? He agreed in a confused tone. They left, and she said that they would see each other tomorrow. She will be waiting for them. Ines asked what she was talking about. Felicia said that she seemed to be very experienced in running a business. He said that he was told about the recommended shops as part of the tourist tour. They heard someone loudly say that he should get out of the way. 2 men approached them, and one of them said that he should see how beautiful the girls were. He thought with a displeased expression on his face that he had to end up in exactly the same situation twice in one day. I wonder how much longer he can hold out at this pace. The next morning, he woke up in bed with the girls, sat up and said that it was already morning. He looked at the city from above and said, "So this is what the southern continent looks like." After that, they ordered food for themselves at the inn, began to eat, and the girls really liked it. Felicia said that even though they ate in the evening, the food at this inn was simply incredible. Wataru said that since they were at the crossroads of the pepper trade route, they knew exactly how to work with spices. He apologized to Lizzie. He can eat as much as he wants. He began to eat what he gave and liked it. She called the gentleman and asked what his plan was for today. He said that he was going to the merchant guild in the afternoon to sell them his spider silk. He thought that sightseeing would be a little difficult. She said that they got very lost yesterday. Ines said that it was indeed very unsafe. He thought that it was mainly because of the attractiveness of these two that he got into trouble. He said that they needed to make a deal and leave the country before the civil war started. He wanted to replenish his food supplies and shop at the souvenir market. He asked to accompany him this time too. They agreed and asked what he was going to take as a souvenir. He asked if a guildmaster liked to drink, maybe something that the girls would like. A girl came to him and said that she brought them fruit juice. The visitors should think about exotic clothes. They were quite beautiful. He liked the idea, after which they went to the store and the girls changed into new clothes. He thought their clothes were beautiful, and the saleswoman said they suited them perfectly. Felicia asked if he was really going to buy them that. The protagonist agreed, saying they hadn't had new clothes in a while and that they could blend in with the crowd anyway. Ines thanked him and said that this fabric, when the rays of light hit it, begins to shine, is wonderful. He said that then he should take this fabric as a souvenir. How much will it cost him? The saleswoman said that they are currently having a discount, so only 5 silver coins. He was surprised by this, and she said that this fabric is especially popular with girls. He imagined that Camilla might like it and agreed to buy it. After that, they passed several more different shops, and she happily told the gentleman that she was grateful for the alcohol. When they return to the ship, they will definitely need a drink. He said that they have already bought a lot of souvenirs. He called Felicia and said that she should not hesitate to ask if she needs anything. She declined and said that this outfit was enough for her. Ines looked at one stall and asked if this was the fabric he bought. He noticed it, agreed, and noted that it cost several times less. He said in a shocked tone that this was the same fabric that he bought for 5 million. This alcohol costs half as much as he bought. He fell to his knees. Felicia asked in a worried tone, "Is he okay?" He said in a shocked tone, "So this is what business is. It's scary." Later, Ines said that then it would be a lot of fun to engage in price cutting. They are going to buy pepper, so they should try to lower the price for it. He asked in a confused tone, "Is she going to lower the price for pepper?" She agreed and said that spider silk is also expensive and they will definitely buy it. She does not understand their language at all, so she is counting on him. He rented a donkey for 50 copper coins and thought he was interested, but maybe he will not be able to. Later they came to Mary and she said, "Welcome back. You brought spider silk?" He agreed, pointed at the cart, and she said with surprise that he had brought quite a lot. They would take care of the transportation right away. They came to the hall with the pool, and she said that she apologized for keeping him waiting. This is really very high-quality spider silk. If he is a member of the guild, they will buy it for as much as 5 platinum coins. He thought that he bought it with gold, so it seemed that this would be enough. She said that only if he delivered it directly to the stores, the payment might increase slightly. Perhaps it could increase by about 1 platinum coin. Would that be normal? He was surprised by what he heard and thought that he felt pressure from Ines, who was demanding negotiations. 1 billion is already quite a lot, but he does not know which stores he can go to and who will help him with this. So he can only trust the guild with this. Given the civil war, he wants to do it quickly, but 1 billion. Mary remembered something and said that if he sold it wholesale, he would get a 5% discount on the purchase of pepper, and as a souvenir, they would give him a wonderful assortment of spices. He was surprised by this and agreed to it. She thanked him, and after that, the 3 of them went outside. MC said that at the moment they could buy pepper for 2 platinum coins. He would get enough pepper in exchange for spider silk, but it would take time to prepare, so they would have to wait. In the end, they could not bargain. Ines called the gentleman and asked if it was okay with him. So be it, right? He said that indeed, even without this, they made a good profit. He rented a warehouse for pepper because of the large quantities, so they should start transferring it to the rubber boat. They agreed, and a girl approached Felicia, handed her flowers, and asked for 30 copper coins. He looked at her and said that this was yesterday's child. She apologized, with a slightly sad look, and said that she could no longer buy flowers. A girl ran up to them and called Mimi with a worried look. She called her mother and said that they were the customers from yesterday. She hugged her daughter, looked at them and asked, "So it was they who bought flowers from her yesterday?" She was very grateful to them for their help. He asked with a surprised look, "Did she say help?" She agreed and said that they wanted to avoid a civil war and waited out in their home village, but they had no money at all. She called the gentleman. He turned around and said that he would translate now. He told them what she had said, and Ines said loudly that as soon as they came here, everything looked like some kind of commercial complaint. The family walked down the street, the child waved, and Felicia apologized and asked if she could buy flowers from her. She realized that her words sound selfish, but she wanted to help them return home. He thought that she was just as worried about her people. He agreed and said that she could go and buy some. She thanked him with a happy expression and ran towards them. Ines leaned towards him and asked the master, "It seems he is more polite to her, doesn't he?" He turned to her and asked, "Didn't he buy her alcohol?" He thought that his mood always improved after making a couple of good purchases. After some time, he used the return to ship skill and teleported all the things. He raised his hands with a happy expression and said loudly that in the end, they loaded all the pepper and received 7 platinum coins. He had already run out of money, so it was time for them to return to the ship. Felicia asked, however, if they would return to the southern continent again, wouldn't they? He said that he really wanted to explore that continent again. Ines said that she thought the Civil War would make its own adjustments to people's lives. So from here they go to the southern cities. But before that, they must fulfill her wish and find a suitable island for the Dark Elves to migrate to. Felicia agreed and said that she really wanted it. Later they sailed away, and the girls said that in the end, things had finally calmed down here. Tabori was interesting because there were rare things there, but the security there left much to be desired. MC took out Lizzie and said that he apologized for spending all this time in the bag. He said that he was fine. Ines approached him, called out and asked if she could take a shower. He agreed, and Felicia called out to her and asked why she didn't take a shower in front of the master. She winked at him and asked if he wanted to keep her company. Later, they sat together on the couch, and he said that he wanted to stick to their current plans. As he said, before leaving Tebori, they would return to the southern cities to find a suitable island for the Dark Elves to migrate to, as she wanted. She agreed and said that she was still worried that they might be caught by hunters. It would be better if the island was away from trade routes. He agreed and said that then they should make a large detour along their original route. After that, they would search, keeping a close eye on their food supplies. If they found an island, they would find out if there were any people or animals there. She agreed to this, and Ines took out a can of alcohol and said that they should raise their glasses to finding the best island. She was confused by this and was about to object, but he agreed and said that they should drink to a successful search. They drank a little together, and after that, their journey in search of the island began. Their journey continued for some time. He came to Ines and asked how long their food would last. She said she would look into it, maybe another half a month. He said that in that case he thought they shouldn't sail too far. She said that there was nothing worse than being left in the open sea. Maybe they should think about returning to the southern cities. He agreed and said that he hoped they would find an island soon. Felicia stood above, called out to them loudly, and said that she saw an island. They swam up to the island she saw, and she said that there seemed to be little room for habitation there. Wataru looked around and said that there was an island exactly like it. He had an idea. They should explore this area. He thought there should be a large island somewhere. She asked him with a puzzled look what he meant. He said that he didn't know the details, but it seemed that these islands were created by volcanic activity or an earthquake, which is why there are islands in the oceans at all. They admired his knowledge, and he, looking confused, said that there was nothing surprising about it. Speaking of food, they had enough for a week, so they should speed up. However, it started to rain, and he said that they should wait it out inside the ship. They went inside. Felicia called them and asked what they thought about tea. She handed them the cups. She thanked her and said that they had stopped, waiting for the rain to stop. She said that it was true. After all, nothing could be done about this weather. She started to cry and said in a sad tone that especially when they stayed here for the whole week, they were worried about it and said that everything would be fine. It would end soon. She should rest. She was thinking about it too much. She listened to his advice and went into the room to sleep. After some time, she woke up, felt that the ship had moved, looked out the window and said with a surprised look that, however, it was still raining. She went upstairs. Ines noticed her and said loudly that she should quickly go upstairs. She went outside. The main character called her, pointed to the side and said that she should take a look. It was simply amazing. She looked where he pointed and said that it was a huge island. They started sailing around the island, and he said that there was a river, which meant they could return here. They got on a boat, sailed along the river, then went down to the island and started exploring everything around. Later, they climbed a mountain, looked around with a joyful look, and he said that from here you can see the whole sea. Ines looked in the same direction with admiration and said that it was so wide. Felicia was standing nearby, also surprised by this, and agreed. When night fell, they sailed back and he asked, so, they had been exploring the island for the last 2 days. What did she think about it? She happily said that she had not noticed any signs of life. There was a river, forests, meadows. It was the perfect place for a settlement. He asked. There were goblins in the forest. That was not a problem, right? She agreed, and said that the villagers would cope with it. They had been cutting down forests and building villages for centuries, and they would deal with them the same way as always. Ines said that there were also plenty of animals to hunt here. He called Felicia, and she called the master in a serious tone and asked if he could settle the dark elves on this island. He happily agreed and said that he would help them in any way he could. She began to cry with happiness and thanked him loudly. After some time, they returned to the ship. He stretched and said that it was time to return to the southern city. By the way, he used to have an ability called autopilot. So he points to the place he wants to go on the map, and after that, he activated the skill. The ship began to move on its own, and he was very happy about it. He went down to the room with the others, and Inez asked in surprise if it was normal for the ship to be moving now. He, with a satisfied expression on his face, said that it was working with the autopilot skill. If they had been somewhere once, the boat would sail there on its own. They were surprised by this, and Felicia asked, "That's great. Does that mean she doesn't have to take sleep breaks?" He said that the ship would move even while sleeping. Inez said with a happy look that this way they would reach their destination many times faster than before. He agreed and said that at this rate, it seemed they would reach the southern cities in a day or so. She said that this ship was returning to the southern cities and it passed close to her hometown, so she would like to stop if he didn't mind. He said that then they could talk about immigration. "Do you think it's okay that they would arrive so quickly?" She said that everything would be fine. It was a closed village, but her father was the chief, and it seemed he would be happy. He agreed to this and asked if he could give her father a souvenir of the alcohol he bought in the south. She said that he didn't have to worry so much about the slaves. He was surprised by this and thought that he would have to meet her father. The man who enslaved his daughter will meet him, right? Isn't that a death sentence? He said with a worried look that he hoped there would be enough alcohol. Inez called the master and said that she would be on deck with Lizzie. He agreed and looked sick, saying that his stomach was starting to hurt. Felicia took his hand and said that she was very grateful that he had found a safe haven for them, the Dark Elves. As she had already told him when they signed the contract, she intends to give herself entirely to her master, so she would like to thank him. He looked very confused about this, and she leaned in to kiss him. MC became very frightened imagining her father, put his hand on her shoulder and said that he was grateful. It made him very happy, but they hadn't even done anything properly yet. He suggested that they now focus on the migration issue. Inez looked into the room and said with a smile that he would regret not having decided to do this. He said with a tense look that they should stop. He had already made up his mind. Felicia said with a smile that she agreed. Let it be as he said. 2 days later, they reached the village. He began to look around, saw a burnt house and wondered, they really were under attack, weren't they? She began to look around and said that this village was empty. What was going on here? She looked up, turned to them, and with a serious expression said that both of them were not allowed to move until she gave permission. They were surprised by this. But at that moment, several armed men jumped out of the trees and surrounded them. One of the men asked what was under the blue stone. She answered with a calm expression, "Fairy eggs," and they looked at each other in silence for a few seconds. The people who jumped down joyfully took off their masks, called her by name and said, "Welcome back. She looks well." The villagers came out of hiding and began to greet her. Felicia turned to them and said that they were both safe now. Inez said that this was how they had all been hiding. He said with surprise that it was unexpected. He thought about it, but anyway, they have very kind faces. Another man came to them, whom Felicia called Papa, and he asked if they had guests. He was Federico, the village chief. She was about to say something, and Wataru loudly introduced himself and said that it was nice to meet him. He asked with a serious expression on his face to follow him. After that, they came to the house. He listened to them and said that this means immigration. He agreed and said that as his daughter said, it is a very beautiful island. He asked with a calm expression on his face, and he was even ready to bring them, strangers, there. He agreed with a tense look and thought that he knew that he should have asked her to tell him first. Suddenly, he slammed his fist on the table, started crying and said that he was such a good person. He was very grateful for this. This was the realization of their dream. He couldn't hold back his tears. He calmed down a little and asked, this was a dream come true. But they had to discuss it with the villagers and make a decision. Couldn't he wait a little with this? He agreed and said that they were returning to the southern city, so if they decided on the matter in the meantime, that would be great. They shook hands, and he said that he was looking forward to it. A woman entered the room and asked if they were finished. Federico agreed, and she said with a smile that she was pleased to meet him, that she was Cecilia, Felicia's mother. They would prepare food for them if they wanted to stay in the village today. The protagonist thanked her, noticed her reaction, and said that she could go to her mother. She said that, however, she had to protect him. He looked away and said that Ines was actually here too. She agreed and said that she could leave it with her. She hadn't been home for a long time, hadn't she? She thanked them and went to her mother. Federico looked at them with a smile and said that he was just glad that she was doing well. He called him and said, about the migration, he was grateful that he believed him. He thought that he would be more suspicious. He said with a calm expression that he saw from her behavior that he was a good person. They sacrificed their daughter for the village. Normally, he would not have wanted to join him. However, for bringing their daughter here like this, for allowing him to meet her again. He really appreciated it. He looked at him with a small smile and thought that they were a very good family. May the migration go well, and everyone live in peace. After some time, MC thanked him for his help and said he'd return in 7 days to discuss migration. Federico agreed, thanked him too, and said they should take care of themselves. After that, the three of them started to leave, and Felicia said she was grateful to him. She'd had a long talk with her parents, and they both seemed relieved. He said that was good. Inez said they were really good parents. He turned to her and asked, by the way, what about her family? If she wanted to see them, he would be only too glad. She was surprised by what she heard, refused, and said that if she met her parents, she would have to tell them why she became a slave. That was absolutely out of the question. He thought about it. It was all about gambling debts, wasn't it? He said that now that they had achieved everything they had planned, it was time to return to the southern cities. They agreed, after which they continued sailing, and he figured that from this point, the journey to the southern city was about 2 days. Before arriving, they unloaded the goods from the rubber boat onto the deck of the ship. Unfortunately, the deck was only enough for half. Too much of what they brought could be lost, so they decided to sell the rest at the next opportunity. Now they need to prepare gifts. He looks forward to meeting everyone, especially the ladies. After some time, they returned to the city. Guido came to the guild building, wished good morning, called Camille, and asked, is she here? She turned to him and wished him good morning. He said that he had just met him at the port. He had returned from the southern continent. She was surprised by what she heard, ran to the bay, and called out loudly to Wataru, and said, welcome back. She was glad to see that he was okay. He waved his hand, thanked her, and said that he was back. He thought that they had not seen each other for a long time, and she was still so beautiful. He was so glad that she was here at the harbor, even if it was just part of her job. He called her and said that they needed to deliver the pepper as soon as possible. She agreed with a happy expression. Several people came to her and he said that they would take care of the transportation. He looked at it with admiration and thought that this is what he was thinking about. This is what a girl is who can organize everything. After some time, she said with a joyful look that the pepper was in very good condition. She congratulated him on his success in trading. He thanked her, and she asked, that would be 72 platinum coins in total, right? He agreed and said that he would like to receive the 50 gold coins left in the guild account. He took out some fabric and said that here was also a gift for her. She was surprised by this and asked, isn't this an expensive material? He said that she had helped him a lot with his shopping. There was no need to think about it. She could just take it. She thanked him and said that it was very beautiful. She would take good care of it. He took out a jar of alcohol and said that it was a gift for the guild master. She was surprised by this, thanked him, and said that, however, he was away right now, so she would keep it for now. What was it like for him on the southern continent? He said that he had only been to the kingdom of Catania. He had heard that the king had suddenly died and there was a struggle for his throne. The next time he went there, a civil war might break out there. She was surprised by this and asked in a worried tone, is he planning to go to the southern continent again? He agreed, and she asked, does he understand that it is dangerous? He has earned so much money. He agreed in a confused tone and said that, however, he would like to visit different places, so everything will be fine with him. She said with a dissatisfied expression that it seems that nothing can be done. Later, they went outside, and Ines said that she was completely stunned when he said that he returned with pepper. The protagonist said that he can't tell her about his skills. He thought that, however, he doesn't know why. When she looks at him like that, it makes him nervous. Felicia called him and asked what they will do after that. He said that there are several people to whom he wants to give souvenirs. They should be in a luxury hotel nearby. They asked, aren't these the adventurers he told you about? She would like to meet them too. Later they came to the right place. He was met by many joyful girls and said that they had not seen him for a long time. They all came up to him and said that they were very glad that he returned safe and sound. He agreed and said that he was grateful for their concern. They looked at them and thought that they were all really beautiful, all sparkling and shining. He asked, by the way, where is Kara? They were worried about this question and said that she fell asleep and they needed his help. At that moment, she entered the room, called his name, and he asked with a worried look, is she okay? She ran to him, pushed him to the ground, and said that she missed him very much. She ate a lot of fried food, and she had a fever. Dorothea said that he heard everything correctly. She asks for fried chicken every time they go to the southeastern island. Claretta helped her up and said that 3 days ago she finally fell asleep. He was surprised to think that their obsession with food was surprising. She said that so, if he didn't mind, could he teach her how to cook fried chicken? He agreed and thought that now it was clear what kind of help they wanted. Inez called him over and asked if he knew how to cook. He agreed, and Felicia said that she was wondering what fried chicken was. MC thought it over and said that he would take care of the dishes and they would have a dinner party. He thought with a smile that it was time for his cooking to entertain these girls. Later, he came to the market and said with surprise, there is so much here. Felicia called him over and asked what he was going to cook. He looked thoughtful and said that it was a good question. He seemed to know. He would make courage, so he needed to buy chicken. He looked away and with a surprised expression asked if these were really oysters. The seller agreed and said that they were fresh. They had just been caught that morning. He said with surprise, "Fried oysters sound good. He'll take that." Inez asked if he was going to fry the oysters. It was an unusual way of cooking. He agreed and said that, however, that's how it's done here. When he immerses them in boiling oil, they become crispy on the outside and soft on the inside. It's so delicious, even better if you top it with tartar sauce. Now he wanted to make that sauce. He'd need to buy mayonnaise. She looked at him and said that the master was talking strangely again. He thought he wanted to make mayonnaise. However, was it safe to cook it with eggs from this world? There was a risk of poisoning. He asked if she could tell him if she would eat the eggs raw. She immediately refused, saying that it would give her stomach an ache. Felicia said that, however, as she said, she had heard of cleansing magic that was cast on raw food before eating. A priestess, a member of Girasol, probably knew how to use it. After some time, they met the others, greeted each other, and Claretta said she had come to learn how to cook. Kara said she had just come to look. He called them by name and said they had been waiting for them. She said the hotel had a wonderful terrace. He agreed and said they would cook here today. He thought with a satisfied look that they both had a day off, like a date. She said Elysia and the others would join them in the evening. He said that then they would divide the responsibilities and they could begin. He and Claretta would make courage, Ines would make vegetable soup, and Felicia could clean oysters and shrimp. He called Kara and asked if he could ask her for something. She was confused by this and said that she didn't know how to cook. However, he said it was very simple. She didn't need to worry. She needed to crumble the bread into small pieces. She was happy about this and said that if that was all, then she could help. She started crumbling bread and he called Claretta and asked if she could use peeling magic. She agreed and he asked then, could he ask her to use it on eggs? She agreed, used magic and asked what he was going to do with the eggs. He said that he wanted to make mayonnaise. This caught their attention. He started cooking and said that first you need to add the egg yolk that they just peeled, salt, pepper and lemon juice, and then beat. He thought that he really needed a blender, or at least a whisk. Everyone looked without enthusiasm, but the taste would amaze them. He would show them what mayonnaise was. They really liked the taste when they tried it, and Ines asked what it was. She had never tried anything like it. Claretta said that now she understood what it was. She asked to teach them how to cook it too. He agreed and said that first, however, you need to peel the eggs. Lizzie jumped on his head and said that he could do it too. Wataru picked him up and asked what he was talking about. He said magic, and he was surprised by this. Called Clarette and said that the slime said it could use magic. I think it meant purification magic. Could she test it? She came up and asked with a happy look. It's a sacred slime, right? Let him try it. He called him, offered to try it, and asked him not to overexert himself. He began to put in more effort and was able to use purification magic. She took the egg, began to examine it, and said with surprise that it was really purified. He said with a happy expression on his face that it was wonderful. He was a good boy. After some time, he finished cooking, offered everyone to eat, and thought it was an assortment of fried food. They all began to eat with very happy faces. He thought the dish was a success. Everyone in Girasol, including Ines and Felicia, were happy. 7 days after their celebration, they set off for the dark elven village again. He asked someone with a worried look to stop, but she stood in front of him and told Romano that he had to stop. The guy in front of them asked, "He's talking about helping the villagers migrate?" He swung his axe and said loudly that he could deceive the elder. But this filthy villain would not deceive him. He must let her go if he valued his life. The protagonist called her and asked what they should do. Maybe the villagers were against the relocation? She asked him to wait and said that she needed to find out everything from her father. At that moment, another guy came to them and asked what all the noise was about. Federico saw them and called them by name. He asked with a serious expression what was going on here. Was it him again? He turned to him and loudly told the elder that he shouldn't listen to this dirty villain. He was forcing her to be a slave. She asked loudly in a serious tone, what was he even talking about? He said loudly that at this rate, these freaks would soon be raising them like cattle. The elder called him and said that, unlike him, everyone in the village agreed to the relocation and made a common decision. He should sit quietly and behave decently. He was still angry and said loudly, just think, he brainwashed the elder too. They must not let him deceive them. A man came up to him, hit him on the head with a frying pan, and, with a slightly worried look, said that he was the father of this idiot, and he apologized for the problems his son caused them. He dragged his son and said that he asked to ignore him. They would continue planning the move. Federico called him and said that they were truly sorry. MC said that there was no need to worry. He understood his reason for not wanting to move. Federico said that he was just too selfish. The half-human hunters already know about this village, and there aren't many of them left. They have no choice but to move to another place. But this guy, he had an idea and said that he offers to discuss the action plan and everything else. The island they found will be a wonderful place. They came to his house and he said that he heard that the village now has 35 inhabitants. His ship won't be able to transport everyone at once, so they will make 2 trips. It will take about 2 days to get to the island. The elder understood him and said he would think about how to divide everyone up. He said he had also bought tents to live in, a 6-month supply of food, and various tools for cultivating the land. They also needed to move disassemblable buildings to the island. He asked in a surprised tone, "Is he taking this so seriously? They should name the village after him." He asked not to do this and thought that all the villagers had been notified of everything that very day, and preparations for the relocation had immediately begun. He changed the interior of the ship using his abilities. Felicia said that most of the villagers had never traveled on a magic ship before, so there shouldn't be any problems. Inez agreed and asked, "So that means they won't be able to use the microwave, refrigerator, or shower, right?" She said it wouldn't be for long. They needed to keep the master's abilities a secret for as long as possible. 5 days later, Federico said he was handing the villagers over to him. Wataru agreed and said that they would be leaving then. Many elves climbed aboard and admired the magical ship. He thought there were 20 people there, counting them, as expected, quite crowded, and it would be like this for another 2 days. He heard someone scream, turned around, and saw the man who tied up Romano, put a bag over his head and greeted him. He was surprised by this and asked with a worried look, "What the hell is that?" He said that it was his stupid son. He tied him up, so there was no need to worry. He would be monitored so that he did not ruin the journey. He agreed with a confused tone and said that it was time to hoist the sails. The ship began to sail. Some felt sick from seasickness, and others looked into the distance and said that it really was moving with the help of magic. The winds were favorable to them. After some time, Romano calmed down. All the elves fell asleep, and Ines said that it was not surprising that everyone was tired. Felicia said that this was their first time traveling by sea, and after all, everything moved very smoothly. On the second day at sea, the protagonist woke up and said that it was difficult to pretend that he was steering the boat, when in fact it was moving automatically. He looked to the side and, looking very frightened, said loudly that Romano was missing. He came to the back of the ship, where a man loudly said that he should stop doing stupid things. He stood on the edge and loudly told his father that he had warned him. They cannot allow him to betray them. He must turn the ship around immediately, otherwise he would jump overboard. He thought with displeasure that he wished he would jump already. Felicia loudly called his name and said that he should stop. He loudly called her and said that she was free. They should go home. Ines called the master, was about to ask something, and MC agreed and said that he was sure that he liked her and that this was complicating a lot. Romano was about to say something, but he noticed bubbles on the surface of the water, and everyone was very scared when a sea serpent appeared next to them. He remained calm and said that everything was fine, they should go inside. People pushed everyone on the way inside, and Ines, who was pushed, screamed and asked them to calm down. Romano, looking very frightened, said that it was clear, because they would all die because of this. The monster attacked the ship, and he screamed loudly in fear. However, the sea serpent crashed into the barrier, and the elf asked in surprise, "Is it repelling the monster?" Wataru said that they should remain calm. The ship can repel any kind of attack without damage. They all admired this. They successfully reached the island, and the elves began to explore the place. They said that the island was even bigger than he imagined. Such diverse nature, simply wonderful. He asked with a happy expression, "It seems everyone likes it here, right?" Felicia agreed and said that she was very grateful to the master. He and Ines noticed Romano standing at a distance. They approached, and he called him by name. He was surprised by this, turned sharply to him and asked what he wanted. He asked, he was in love with Felicia, right? He became embarrassed because of this, and asked in a confused tone, why was he asking about this? He understood from his reaction that this was true, and asked, so he hates him, right? He has a proposal for him. He will confess to her, and if she accepts his feelings, then he will back off. He is not some kind of villain, after all. What does he think about this? He went to her, and Ines asked why he talks like an alpha. She was about to say something, but noticed his smirk and asked, so he knows that she will refuse him? Romano returned to him, with a happy expression on his face, thanked him and said that he was refused. Later, he thought that a lot had happened. The settlers from the first voyage had set up camp on top of the hill, and they had gone for the rest. 6 days later, they brought the second group of elves, and he thought the resettlement had been successful. All the settlers had arrived on the island, which meant the founding of a new dark elf village. Sometime later, he came to the island and was surprised to say that they were already building houses. Ines said that everything seemed to be going smoothly. Federico called him and said that he apologized for having to travel back and forth. He said that there was no problem with that. He brought the seeds in the cart, as he had asked. Could he help with anything else? He declined, and said that he had already done more than enough. They could handle the rest on their own. He was very grateful to him. The protagonist called Felicia and said that she thought he wanted to go trading, but if they left, they would not be able to return for several months. She agreed and said that, however, as her father said, it seemed best to leave the settlers to their own devices for a while. She thanked him, and he raised his hand with a joyful expression and said that then they would go and trade pepper. They began to sail away, and he assumed they were off to trade pepper for the second time. Thanks to the autopilot, the journey to Tabori took only 10 days. He met Mary, and she asked with a worried look, have they been in the city all this time? He denied it and said that they had made quite a big circle. He thought that fortunately, the civil war had not started yet, and they were able to stock up on pepper for 65 platinum coins in no time. Later they sailed on, and he read something with a thoughtful look. Felicia brought him a mug of a drink and asked if he was okay. He looked at her and said that he was doing some calculations. He was a little greedy and bought a ton this time. Now they have pepper for 515 boats. Ines asked with surprise, can they buy a luxury liner with that? He said that this liner costs 500 platinum coins. However, he really can buy it. She said with a shocked expression on her face that with their savings they had 1,854 platinum coins. No way. She would finally be able to live happily. He agreed and said that they would have the best food, wine, and entertainment. She said that there were casinos and shops there. It was simply paradise. They imagined it with joyful faces, and Felicia raised her hand and asked, but this is money that they will only get if they sell all the pepper, right? Their faces suddenly became serious, and he thought that this was a problem. He said with a thoughtful look that he could only sell pepper for 20 boats to the guild merchants at a time. Anything more would exceed the ship's capacity, and this would eventually arouse suspicion. However, selling pepper for 515 boats would require 26 trips to the southern continent and back. She said that in this case he would attract attention, because people from the continent would suspect that he knew a proven route to the southern continent. He said that if he took more ships and created a fleet with more pepper, it might not look strange. She said that she did not think the nobility would remain silent. If he had more than one ship of that size, he said with a tense look that he had goods, but there was no way to exchange them for money. It was so difficult to make a profit without attracting attention. Ines had an idea and asked what if he sold the pepper to someone other than the merchant guild. This caught their attention, and she said that he would only attract attention if he sold everything in one place. He could simply sell the pepper in other places, not just in the southern city. He could tell merchants from other countries that he bought his pepper in the southern city and not stand out. They loudly agreed, and Felicia said that she hadn't even thought of such a thing. MC said with admiration that it was great. She was a genius. She laughed and said in a satisfied tone that she knew about it. He said that they would be able to travel, so it would be fun. Lizzie jumped into his arms and said that he wanted to go. He agreed and said that thanks to her, they now had a plan. They would go to the southern city. They agreed and went to the guild. Camilla said that the pepper he brought this time was in excellent condition. They wanted to offer him 72 platinum coins for selling. Did he agree to that? He agreed and asked, well, could he have 30 of those coins in cash? She was surprised by this and said loudly that she hoped he didn't mean to say that he was going to trade again. He denied it and said that he would like to explore other countries on the continent, so he wanted to use the money for traveling. She asked him in a worried tone to forgive her outburst. He said that he would like to see the sights. Could she recommend anything? She thought about it and asked, maybe the great cathedral of Palermo in the east? She hadn't seen it herself, but they say it's a stunning building. He said with a thoughtful look that he didn't know much about religion. Is it still worth visiting? She agreed and said that she had been told it was a peaceful and calm place, with very different people there. He thanked her, and then they all went outside. Ines asked if they would go on a trip to Palermo. That sounded very exciting. He asked if there were any other places they wanted to visit. She denied it, and Felicia said that she didn't either. She couldn't wait to see the big cathedral. He said with a happy expression that then they would begin preparing for the trip. However, first he needed to see someone again and give them souvenirs from the southern continent. They immediately understood that he was talking about the girls from Girasoli. Later he came to them, bringing a lot of jewelry, which they looked at in surprise, and Alessia said that it was very beautiful. He said that these were souvenirs from the southern continent for everyone. They could choose whatever they liked. They thanked him, and Irma asked if he could help her choose something suitable. He apologized and said that he was not very knowledgeable about fashion. She said that, however, traveling to the southern continent for the second time was not an easy task. He planned to continue the pepper trade. He denied it and said that they were going to travel around the continent and sell pepper in the countries they would visit. The first stop would be Palermo. Claretta was very surprised by this and asked loudly, "Is he going to Palermo?" He agreed in a confused tone, and Alessia apologized for her and said that she had always wanted to visit there. He asked, "Can't they travel anywhere with their capabilities?" She said with a slightly sad expression that there were several countries neighboring Palermo where humans dominate. Beastmen like them were not welcome there, so they couldn't. He thought that due to human domination, the village of Felicia also suffered from it. He called her and said that there was a sea route. She asked loudly, looking worried, "Does he mean that he can take them with him?" He apologized with a confused look and said that he hadn't thought of that. Irma turned to her and said that they could face inspection even if they traveled by sea. She agreed, apologized, and said that she was sure that Palermo was a wonderful place. She hoped that he would enjoy it. Sometime later, that night, he sat on the ship, looked at the system window, remembered what had happened, and thought that it seemed that Claretta really wanted to go. He should have offered her, but unlike the story with the Dark Elves, it would be a long journey, so his abilities would definitely be revealed. He looked at the ships and said that if they could travel together, he would buy a new one. A luxurious ship caught his attention and he wondered in surprise, what kind of ship was it? An artificial island with a jacuzzi and 6 bedrooms? 4 platinum coins. Wait, that's so cool. He imagined the girls from Girasol on such a ship, went to the girls and said he'd made his decision. He's buying a new ship and they'll invite Girasol on the trip. MC reflected that Palermo was about 17 days away by magic boat to the east. The first stop would be Bergamo. It's the capital, home to the great cathedral, about 3 days away. If he was inviting Girasoli on such a long trip, he'd have to make every effort to be hospitable. Maybe he should make some desserts, a pudding for example, then something everyone could play. How about Reversi? He thought the carpenters could make him a set, and most importantly, swimsuits. They absolutely had to buy some swimming trunks so they could relax in the jacuzzi. The protagonist asked with a smile if they knew where to buy some swimming trunks. Both girls looked at him in confusion and asked, "What kind of swimming trunks?" He excitedly explained that they were the clothes they wore when they swam. Hadn't they ever heard of that? Ines wondered what the point of wearing clothes was if he was in the water. The protagonist thought in horror that this couldn't be true. So they don't have swimsuits in this world? Right, there are monsters here. So swimming as a pastime doesn't exist, right? What was he even doing? He'd be considered a pervert if he made it himself and gave it to Girasol. He didn't even know if they'd wear it if they'd never seen it before. Felicia worriedly asked if he was okay. MC wondered what else he needed, and when they traveled by wagon, they'd set up camp. In that case, his small tent, which he'd made to house the boat while he was in Western Town, would be very useful. He needed to make one for everyone. So he needed to talk to the tailor about swimsuits, ask the carpenters to make a Reversi set and tents, stock up on food for the journey, and find ingredients for pudding. He noted with a smile that he had a lot to do. First, he goes to the carpenter's shop to see Donino. After a while, the carpenter himself asks if he needs 64 round stones painted black and white. What kind of nonsense is that? The protagonist explains it's a game. The man points out that it's not shipbuilding, but whatever. Including the tents, he'll do it all for 61 silver coins. He also got some rare booze. The MC thanks him and says he'll come pick it up in 3 days. After some time, he asks the tailor if she can make a certain outfit. The girl agrees with a smile and adds that they accept orders for any clothing he desires. The protagonist touches one dress and notes that, firstly, the fabric needs to be soft to the touch and waterproof. It's a dress, right? Let her use that as an example. The tailor let Ines try on a short dress and asked if it was just a prototype. But there must be something similar. He happily agreed, musing that it was less revealing than a swimsuit, but if there was something similar, Girasol would probably agree to wear it. A few days later, Claretta joyfully exclaimed that she thanked Wataru for inviting them on the journey. They would be with him all the way to Palermo. MC replied with a smile that he didn't need these formalities. Let them have fun. He was delighted to welcome them aboard the Klugo. Everyone stepped inside and began to look around in admiration. He began to think that he was actually going on a journey with Girasol. It was just like a dream, but first he needed to do something. The protagonist called out to everyone present and said that before they left, he had an important request. In truth, this ship holds a secret, or rather, it holds it. It would probably be easier to show than tell, right? So he summons a boat. Instantly, an inflatable boat appeared in front of him. Everyone stared at it in confusion and asked, "What is it?" MC replied that it was a little dented and deformed, but it was a boat. He has an ability called ship summoning. Klugo was also summoned by him. Alessia, surprised, noted that this was a unique ability. Irma inquired, "So the boat he used to ferry them to the southeastern island was also his creation?" Wataru agreed and added that he summoned it with his ability. She smiled slightly and noted that he wasn't just lucky. The protagonist replied that this ship still had plenty of secrets, but he would reveal them along the way. He might get into trouble if others found out about his ability, so could they please keep it a secret? That was his condition for delivering them to Palermo. Alessia said she was shocked, but she understood. They would make sure it remained a secret. The protagonist sighed with relief and exclaimed that they were now sailing to Palermo. After that, everyone started having fun and enjoying their time on the ship. Except Wataru. He wondered why everyone was having so much fun except him. He'd forgotten that the autopilot didn't work in places he was new to. Something awaited him in the evening. After a while, MC popped into the cabin and asked if they'd all met Klugo. Alessia happily thanked him for piloting the ship and remarked that Ines and Felicia had taught them a lot. He smiled and remarked that it was time to show them the special ship they would be spending the night on. The girls excitedly asked, "What does he mean? A new ship?" The protagonist climbed onto the deck and then summoned a huge ship, complete with palm trees. What they saw absolutely shocked everyone. Wataru himself was surprised and thought it was like something out of science fiction. Ines jumped on him with delight, hugging him and exclaiming how wonderful it was. "And what kind of ship is this?" He replied that he'd come up with a name for it. "This ship is a top-tier shelter." He invites them to enjoy what it has to offer. Using a special skill, their shelter disguises itself as a ship. He tried to make it look like a wooden ship, but it would have been a really strange vessel anyway. Felicia smiled and noted that it would still stand out much less than before. Alessia admiringly said that she understood everything. Therefore, Klugo's exterior and interior are also quite different. MC explained with a smile that the shelter is just a floating island, so it doesn't move. but as a place to rest, it's the best option. He invites them to see what's inside. After that, everyone boarded and began to look around in admiration. Ines happily jumped on the bed and exclaimed that there was a large bedroom. The protagonist himself was surprised and thought that he had seen a photo, but only of the ship. It's set up like a resort house. He turned to Alessia and noted that there were 6 bedrooms. They would occupy 2, so they could arrange the others as they pleased. The girl asked in surprise, "There are 4 rooms?" "No, she's uncomfortable, so please let them pay him for the trip." The protagonist exclaimed that he didn't need anything. They had already agreed that in exchange, they would protect him. She agreed and added that as soon as they arrived in Palermo, they would definitely protect him with all their might. After that, they went out onto the deck, and he asked that they had examined most of the ship's equipment. But what had caught their eye the most? Dorothea replied that she was intrigued by the bathtub-like contraption located on the 2nd-story deck. MC was overjoyed and exclaimed that he would take her there. After that, they all climbed into the jacuzzi and began to swim. He, burning with shame, wondered if it was rubbish. Is this all happening in his head? No, not in his head. He's in the jacuzzi with Girasoli's members, Alessia said with a smile, thinking it would be weird to get into the water fully clothed. But it was so much fun. The protagonist stared at them unwaveringly. Felicia called out to him, noticing that he was staring too brazenly. He climbed out of the hot tub and said with a smile that he'd get everyone drinks. Let Ines and Felicia take a dip too. As he left, the protagonist thought that after deciding to take on this trip, he didn't want them to hate him for staring so much. But even with so many women here, not a single one of them wanted to flirt with him, right? He knows he's a bit out of their league, but he wants to have at least a sliver of hope. He's talked to Alessia a lot, so he doesn't think she doesn't like him, but it's entirely possible they're hanging out because she's the leader of Girasol. He doesn't think she sees him as a man. He and Claretta used to cook together, so they're quite close, but they only talked about recipes and daily menus, so what are they, housewives? And what about Irma? Even when he looks at her inappropriately, she doesn't get angry and plays along. She does it on purpose, right? Wow, she's just teasing him. It's a thorny path to seduction. After a while, Alessia said with a smile that today had really been fun, and she thanks him. At that moment, Marina and Dorothea approached him. She called out to him and mentioned that they had a favor to ask. Could they sleep with him? And Rimu was with them. MC was incredibly embarrassed to think that Rimu was popular now. No, he's just sweet, that's why everyone loves him, but he's jealous. The next day, sitting at the helm, he thought about how great the jacuzzi was, but he couldn't communicate with everyone during the voyage. He hadn't planned for that. At that moment, Felicia approached him and said she brought him some tea. The protagonist thanked her and added that he was a little tired, so he suggested they take a break. She replied that she felt a little awkward that he was the only one who had to work while they were resting. He smiled and said that everything was fine. Besides, steering the ship wasn't that hard. Ines exclaimed, "Let him teach them how to steer the ship too. Then they could take turns and relax." At that moment, Alessia and Irma were relaxing on the deck, looking at various photographs and instructions. Suddenly, the ship sped up dramatically, so much so that they were blown away. Dorothea worriedly asked, "What happened? Did they suddenly speed up?" The group leader agreed, adding that it must be an emergency. Meanwhile, Ines, steering the ship, exclaimed with incredible joy that it was incredible. Alessia ran up to the main character and asked what had happened. Was he okay? He replied that he was teaching Ines how to steer. Felicia eagerly exclaimed that it was her turn now. She was asking her to switch. The girl replied that she didn't want to. This was so much fun. Alessia, seeing this, said that it sounded really cool. Then she took the helm and began chasing the shark, which was simply swimming in the water. After one maneuver, Felicia exclaimed that it had worked. She had lost the shark. Nothing less was expected from her. Marina said that it would be much more fun if they attracted more sharks. Let her switch with her. Dorothea, seeing this, sheepishly apologized for her ally's behavior. The protagonist smiled and said he could take a break and was glad everyone was having fun. He had some free time, so he'd go get a snack. Claretta approached him and asked if he was busy. She wanted to help him. After that, they baked some cakes together. By this time, everyone else had returned, and they sat down on the couch and started talking. MC, seeing this, thought that these 4 had become quite good friends. He wanted to be better friends with them too. Suddenly, Kara shouted sharply that the pudding was simply delicious. Please let him make it again sometime. He thought that right now, she was the one who felt the most sympathy for him. It wasn't exactly what he was looking for, but it was wonderful in its own way. The next day, monsters began to attack the ship, but the Girasol members deftly dealt with them. The protagonist, standing on the deck, excitedly asked what kind of monsters they were. Dorothea explained that they were mermen. They weren't strong, but they were a nuisance because they attacked in packs. Claretta happily remarked that they were perfect for practicing magic with Rimu. He was shocked to think that Rimu had learned magic. The slime instantly attacked the monster and killed it. MC, in shock, exclaimed that it was amazing. He thanked Claretta from the bottom of his heart. Ines, watching the surface of the water, said that she was already tired of mermen. Let Felicia let her pilot the ship. After this, the protagonist reflected on how smooth their journey had been. 18 days had passed since they left the southern city. Soon they should reach the port city of Bergamo. After that, they would travel by carriage. After some time, he spotted land and informed all the women about it. After that, they arrived in the city itself and entered the main square. The locals began to look at them in surprise, commenting that it was a beauty party. These were very beautiful girls. MC thought they really did stand out. He should conceal his presence as much as possible to avoid becoming a target for jealousy. Alessia remarked that it was a great relief to finally be back on dry land. Where were they heading first? He replied that they needed to find the Merchants Guild. The girl agreed and added that they would take care of his safety. The protagonist paused, hoping they wouldn't get involved in anything strange. After some time, they arrived at the Merchants Guild and entered the building. Approaching reception, he asked the employee if she could tell them where they could buy food. After that, they went to an inn to inquire about some job openings. After some time, they arrived at the Filippo company, recommended by the guild. A man approached Alessia and asked what they, beautiful adventurers, might be looking for in their shops. MC called out to him and remarked that he had business with him. He thought that he didn't need to get into any trouble. He was heir. After that, the two of them sat down on chairs. The man remarked that this pepper was of exceptional quality. It was so fresh that he felt like it was grown on the southernmost continent. So, how much would this pepper cost? The protagonist became nervous and thought, can he set the price? But he doesn't know how much to name. Camilla bought the cart for 3 platinum coins, so maybe he should just take 4 platinum coins? 400 million yen? Isn't that too much? He said that he wasn't good at negotiating. How about he name his price, and if it's higher than he thinks, he'll sell it to him. What does he think about that? The man asked if he only had one chance. MC agreed and mused that if he offered more than 3 platinum and 60 gold coins, he'd agree. The man remarked that pepper of such high quality isn't something you often come across. To be absolutely sure, how about 4 platinum and 50 gold coins? The protagonist happily agreed and mused that he'd offered even more than he thought. After a while, they went outside together. Alessia remarked that he'd done a good job negotiating. He thanked her and said that they'd finished their business very quickly. Should they head to the capital tomorrow? The girl happily agreed. Claretta excitedly said that in a few days they'd be at the great cathedral. She was starting to get nervous. Irma wondered if she was rushing things too much. The girl exclaimed that the great cathedral was stunning. The beauty of the massive stone cathedral, of course, goes without saying. But it's also said that divine idols, bestowed upon them by the god of creation himself, are kept in the cathedral. MC thought he had a bad feeling about this. Dorothea asked if they could go and arrange a carriage. Everyone agreed and set off. At this moment, the god, watching the main character with the help of a magic staff, asks that he was almost there, right? They hadn't seen him in a while. The next day, their group set off in carts towards the capital. Inez joyfully called out to the protagonist and noted that the capital would soon be in sight. He indicated that they should stop the cart for a minute. He would put the raft away in a moment. Alessia remarked that she had always taken for granted that it was impossible to sit in carts, but thanks to the rubber raft, it was very comfortable. MC replied that he was glad the raft had proven useful. Now, finally, the majestic cathedral of Palermo awaited them. After that, they arrived in the capital itself, Barletta, and saw an incredibly enormous building called the cathedral. The protagonist, completely shocked, declared it an impressive sight. Claretta burst into tears, began to walk forward, and remarked that it was magnificent. Alessia called out to her, pointing out that they should return the carriage first. Eventually, all the girls followed her, followed by the protagonist. After a while, they entered the cathedral itself and began to admire the scale of the building. The MC began to look around and, seeing the statues, wondered if they were divine idols, which, according to Claretta, were gifted by the god of creation himself. If the god of creation really had created this himself, then he had greatly exaggerated his appearance. He wanted to ask about the other statues, but now didn't seem like the right time. Alessia asked if they would pray. The protagonist agreed, knelt down, and mused that it had been a while since he had heard from the god of creation. Thanks to his ship summoning skill, he lived a very pleasant life. He thanked him from the bottom of his heart for this. Instantly, he found himself in the abode of the god of creation. The goddess approached him and, calling out to the god of creation himself, said with displeasure that they were still in the middle of their conversation, so please don't let humans into the kingdom of God. The guy replied that he meant that the goddess of light's lectures were so long, or rather, he was surprised that she could lecture him when he was the god of creation. How was Wataru? MC replied that he is doing very well, and it was all thanks to him. He thought about it. This was the goddess of light. She was so beautiful that he actually thought she was shining, but she looked rather tired. The god of creation asked if he had been working a lot lately, hadn't he? He had called him today because he wanted to praise him. The goddess of light remarked with displeasure that he should keep his interference in the mortal world to a minimum. He replied that he hadn't interfered at all. Those 2 slaves Wataru now had, weren't they both brought to that slave trader? That was her doing, right? MC wondered if that was what he'd thought. Someone was pulling the strings behind the scenes. The god of creation remarked that the goddess of light was very beautiful. He wasn't complaining about anything, So for now, he was doing well, right? That's right. The company he was with now, Girasol, something bad was going to happen to them later, so he should use his ship summoning to help them. If he did, the other gods would bow to him too. The goddess of light shut his mouth and told him to stop saying such things. The protagonist frantically considered this. He was genuinely curious, but it seemed he wasn't allowed to ask any more questions. He wondered if this trouble could be avoided if they acted now. Perhaps they should return to the southern city? The goddess of light replied that, unfortunately, that couldn't be changed. She couldn't tell him anything more, but he was free to choose whether he wanted to participate. Please, let him ignore the god of creation and decide for himself. Immediately after, MC returned to the ordinary world, and then they left the cathedral together. Alessia asked with a smile if the cathedral somehow seemed like a place that purified both body and soul, didn't it? Ines agreed with a smile, adding that there was a sacred atmosphere about it that touched her deeply. The protagonist wondered what he should do. Wouldn't it be better to warn Girasol about what he had just heard in the kingdom of God? Was he some kind of fortune teller? There was no way he would do that. If he didn't know any details, he couldn't warn them about anything. He had heard something unpleasant. Alessia asked what they wanted to do now. Claretta had said she'd stay at the cathedral a little longer. Suddenly, Dorothea ran up to them and shouted that it was an emergency. The protagonist nervously wondered if she could tell him that something unpleasant was already happening. The girl said with a smile that she and Marina had acquired the taming skill. The scout noted with a smile that she'd just prayed to the gods for this. Apparently, they heard her. The MC considered this. It sounded like it could get the god of creation into trouble again. He congratulated them with an excited smile. Dorothea remarked that they also wanted a familiar like Rimu. Would it be okay if they went looking for slimes in the surrounding area after Wataru finished his business negotiations? The protagonist mused that he was terrified of searching for slimes because it sounded perfect for trouble. But even if he refused, they couldn't avoid it. 2 days later, the whole group entered the forest and began searching for slimes. Dorothea explained that this information was very inaccurate, but slimes that can use magic are said to inhabit places with strong natural energy, like a volcano for fire magic, and they had arrived at the place for Valletta. It was the Cave of the Hellish Wind. After that, the whole group entered the cave. Dorothea noted that this cave seemed to be a confusing labyrinth, some parts of which were completely filled with water. That's why it was so unexplored. MC thought about how dark and windy it was, and he was tired. He should have stayed, but there was a catch. Alessia happily remarked that with his ship summoning skill, they could get through the flooded passages. Kara admiringly remarked, who knows what they could find. The protagonist thought that he had ultimately agreed. How could he refuse when they asked him so much? Dorothea, lighting the way with a lantern, noted that their goal was to find a slime. Let them not forget this. Suddenly bats began appearing, but the Girasol members dispatched them with ease. At that moment, a slime hid in a corner of the cave. After some time, they crossed the underground water, dealt with the enormous monster, and crossed the pond again, using the boat. Quite tired, the group decided to take a short break. Kara called out to Wataru with a smile and asked him to make some pudding. Dorothea, seeing this, sighed and asked if coming here had been a mistake. There weren't even normal slimes here. The protagonist inquired that he often sees slimes in the forests, but do they live in caves? The girl replied that she'd never paid attention to slimes before meeting Rimu, so she had no idea. She thought that if monsters appeared here, then slimes should too. Alessia asked if perhaps they should try searching the nearby forest. If they went any further, it would take a long time to get out. Marina called out to her and remarked that she wanted a slime that could use wind magic, so she would look here. The girl replied with a smile that she understood. After that, they continued their search. The protagonist, putting on his hood, exclaimed that the wind was really strong here. Anyway, where was it coming from? Suddenly, he spotted a slime behind a rock and alerted his allies. Dorothea inquired where the slime was. Wataru pointed in surprise and shouted that it had gone deeper into the passage behind that rock. Marina and Alessia immediately ran to the indicated place to search. He said that if they found it, they should approach as slowly as possible. He seemed to be easily frightened. Everyone began running along the ravine after the slime and eventually came across a beautiful place, a small underground island illuminated by the sunlight. Ines said in surprise, to think there was such a place inside the cave. MC noticed movement in the water and exclaimed, "Isn't that the slime they were chasing?" Dorothea said he was right. Let him make a boat, please. He immediately conjured one, and they began searching for the slime. The protagonist asked if they should cross to the other side first. All the girls happily agreed, and they swam across the pond and emerged onto dry land. Dorothea remarked that she bet they were the first humans to set foot there. The protagonist released Rima and pointed out that she shouldn't stray too far. Suddenly, Irma screamed loudly and called everyone to her. At that moment, Rima noticed another slime and began following it. Eventually, she found a huge dragon scale. Alessia exclaimed in delight, "That can't be right. Isn't that a dragon scale?" MC remarked in surprise that he'd never seen one before, but it was quite large. Irma replied, "No, it was a mythical dragon." Claretta added that she definitely sensed traces of divine power from the residual magic in the scales. The The protagonist called out to Inez and asked if they were that rare. The girl replied that she would explain everything. Dragons and mythical dragons were completely different creatures. There were mythical dragons of light, darkness, earth, fire, wind, and water, and as far as they knew, only one dragon of each element existed at any given time. They were intelligent and considered messengers of the gods. Alessia exclaimed in delight that this was incredible. They were extremely lucky to have stumbled upon mythical dragon materials. They should look around here. Maybe they'll find something else. MC wondered in surprise that this seemed serious. But don't tell him it's because the god of creation mentioned troubles to come. No, he said it wouldn't have anything to do with their actions. Everyone had completely forgotten about the slime. Right? After some time, the team members found 9 scales, 3 claws, and 1 tooth. The protagonist asked how much it would cost if they sold everything. Claretta replied that it was inherently impossible to subdue a mythical dragon. The only existing items like this are those gifted heroes in the past, now kept in certain countries. Alessia noted that these had never been sold on the market, so it was impossible to know the price. Kara worriedly said she was afraid to return them. The girl exclaimed that these materials could be used to craft the perfect weapon. Ines asked how about hiding everything away, using the craftsman's skills and keeping the location a secret? Claretta excitedly replied that they couldn't keep all this a secret. By the way, she found several rare medicinal plants here. They should ask the country to protect these plants in this cave. Alessia said she understood everything. If they found more parts of the mythical dragon while studying the plants, they would suspect them of secretly keeping some for themselves. So the girls began to consider what to do with the artifacts they'd found. An hour later, Alessia smiled and exclaimed that they'd say they'd found 2 scales and rare medicinal plants growing here. They'd donate one to the great cathedral and sell the other through a guild they could trust. She suggested they start with that. Half the proceeds would go to Wataru. Okay? The protagonist, surprised, asked if she was sure. The girl happily agreed, noting that they would eventually save the remaining materials for him. He wondered if he should create Klugo and they could all rest first. Everyone happily agreed. At that moment, the slime hiding in the bushes suddenly leaped at Marin and climbed into his arms. The girl asked in surprise, "Aren't there any other slimes here?" Was he lonely? Her name was Marina. Would she like to come with her? They could travel to all sorts of places together. What did she think about that? The slime replied that she agreed. After that, the girl made a familiar contract with the slime and gave it a name. Her new companion is called Fu. Sometime later, they arrived at the Merchant Guild in Barletta. Enzo, the vice guildmaster, said that business was running like clockwork again today, as perfect as his mustache. He reflected on how he made his rounds every day to make sure everything was all right. Noticing the customers arguing, the guy called out to the man and told him to line up like everyone else. He exclaimed angrily that he was rushing. Enzo pointed at his huge bodyguard and told him to leave in that case. The man immediately became agitated and said he would join the line. Looking tired, the guy asked why people couldn't follow the rules. At that moment, the secretary called out to him and pointed out that there was a man asking to see the guildmaster right away. He was waiting over there. Enzo approached the right place, after which the protagonist said they had an extremely important matter to report, so they would like to speak directly with the guildmaster. The guy introduced himself and asked what they were doing. The MC replied that they couldn't discuss it here. He thought it would cause a huge panic. Enzo sighed and noted that there are always people like them, those who inflate and exaggerate everything. The protagonist cried out pitifully that the Adventurers Guild staff had said the same thing, and it had escalated into a huge argument. He begged him to believe them. Enzo asked, "Is this really an important question? If this is a joke, there will be consequences." They then entered the guildmaster's office. The vice guildmaster, standing in the hallway, thought that kicking him out was too impudent. There was no point in doing business with such a group. After a while, the guildmaster called him over and told him to take a look at the table. Enzo saw the artifacts and exclaimed, "This is Starseeker's herb. It's a valuable medicinal herb. And dragon scales are definitely a rare material." The master remarked that these were likely mythical dragon scales. This group were travelers from the Latin Kingdom. They had found these materials while exploring the Hellwind Cave. Enzo said that if this truly was a mythical dragon scale, it would be in great demand in other countries. If word of this leaked, there would be a huge uproar. The master suggested that they must have found 2 scales. They said they would donate one to the great cathedral and wanted to sell the other through them. The vice guildmaster joyfully exclaimed that such a large transaction would be handled through them. The master happily agreed, adding that this was a major undertaking and negotiation between countries. First, they should invite the cardinal to the guild to determine whether the scale was genuine. Then they needed to report these herbs to the medical guild. He wanted to ask him to perform both of these tasks. Enzo immediately tried to take a cart, but the worker replied that all the carts were currently occupied. With an incredibly serious expression, he walked on foot and thought, let the master leave this to him. He would make sure everything was carried out flawlessly. Sometime later, Enzo arrived at the medical guild, burst into the building, and exclaimed that it was an emergency. Could he see the guildmaster immediately? He reflected that he knew the guildmaster well, so everything should go smoothly. Immediately afterward, the medical guild master himself came out to him. Enzo, incredibly agitated, shouted that he needed to discuss a matter of utmost importance. Tell him to throw everyone out of the building immediately. The master, perplexed, threw everyone out. After some time, having listened to the story, he said that he would immediately go to the merchant guild. Enzo thanked him, went outside and thought, what's next? The great cathedral. This wouldn't be easy. Afterwards, he arrived at the right place and tried to summon the cardinal, but was stopped by a guard who remarked that the cardinal was a busy man. If he didn't have an appointment, he wouldn't be able to let him in. Just think, the vice master of the merchant guild would break the rules. Did he even realize how problematic this was? Moreover, if it was such an urgent matter, wouldn't it be standard practice for the guildmaster himself to come in his place? Enzo thought irritably that he was acting just like he usually did. That's why he hated trying to achieve anything by force. The guard said he would inquire about his case. Whether it was truly urgent was up to him to decide. The boy replied no, he would only discuss the matter privately with the cardinal. The guard said that in that case he should leave. At that moment, the locals, overhearing talk of the cardinal, began to worry and ask what was going on. Enzo nervously thought that he mustn't attract attention. What should he do? The guard said that no matter how hard he tried, it was useless. After all, he despised that condescending mustache on his face. However, if he shaved it off, he might consider his request. Enzo, shocked, exclaimed that he was making decisions based on his own tastes, and he called himself a priest. After some time, he finally managed to meet the cardinal and told him the whole story. The man remarked that the mythical dragon might be a problem. He had business to attend to, but after that, he would immediately head to the merchant guild. By the way, what happened to his mustache? Enzo replied that for various reasons, he had shaved it off. 2 weeks later, a large crowd had gathered in the capital's main square. Felicia, observing the scene from the window of a nearby building, called out to the protagonist and noticed that there they were. At that moment, the members of the Girasol group rode through the square, riding in a carriage, carrying the dragon scales. Ines remarked that he should have joined the parade too. The protagonist exclaimed that he couldn't sit there with them. After this, the guildmaster turned to the vice master and joyfully declared that it was magnificent. He's really been working hard these past 2 weeks. He's matured, or rather, changed his image, right? Enzo replied with a smile that he simply shaved his mustache. There's still a lot of work ahead. After the parade itself, MC said with a smile that this marks the end of their business in Palermo. Where should they go next? After a week, he reflected that exactly a week had passed since Girasola's parade. They had become the stars of Barletta, and now staying there was extremely inconvenient, so they decided to return to the southern city. Figuring that the sooner they got rid of the mythical dragon's scale, the better, they decided to sell it to the Barletta Merchant Guild for 200 platinum coins. That's a whopping 10 billion yen. After some time, the protagonist, while on the ship, thought that a luxury liner cost 50 billion, so he still couldn't afford it. But for that amount of money, he could buy something else. At that moment, the girls approached him. Irma noticed they were done showering and thanked him. The protagonist thought it had been a while since he'd seen beautiful women fresh out of the shower. She asked where Alessia and the others were. Dorothea replied that they were steering the boat. She felt so sorry for them. MC said he was also sorry that Ines and Felicia were always so short-tempered. She turned to Fu and said that besides Marin, she could play with her and Rima. Kara called out to Wataru and said she was hungry. What were they going to do for dinner? He replied that he'd bought a whole bunch of potatoes and barletta. He suggested they try making croquettes. Claretta happily exclaimed that she'd help too. The protagonist, smiling, said they'd boil the potatoes until they were soft. She could help him finely chop the onion. Could he ask Kara to cut the bread into small pieces, like she did back then? The girl happily took the knife and agreed, then began cutting the bread. He, seeing this, paused. She said she was a bad cook, but she was so happy when she could help. At that moment, Felicia and Ines returned. She happily asked what they were cooking. A delicious aroma wafted through the air. The protagonist, smiling, said dinner would be ready soon. Felicia apologized for having to cook while she was playing and having fun, even though she was a slave. He chuckled and told her not to worry. He was bored anyway. At that moment, Marina, seeing that the slime was treating Dorothea well, began to think she was becoming attached to her. The girl jealously grabbed her familiar and exclaimed that she would be with her all day tomorrow. After that, they all sat down at the table to dine. MC, having tasted the food, thought that this was their first meal on the ship in a while. He really felt at home here. Kara exclaimed delightedly that the croquettes were delicious. Alessia agreed, noting that they were light and crispy on the outside, and the potatoes were fluffy inside. He thought that, by the way, he often ate croquettes in Japan. A delicious dinner was being served next to him. He really wanted some Worcestershire sauce and miso soup. This is bad. He wants rice. He tried not to think about it, but now he can't help but think about it. The protagonist loudly exclaimed that he wanted rice. When it was already dark, Felicia approached him and asked if he was okay. He replied with a smile, revealing a rather awkward side of himself. Even though they could eat any food they wanted, if he kept saving up for a luxury liner, he had just lost control a little. With the money they had just received, he could buy another boat. This one was called a ferry. Inside, apparently, there were a variety of shops and restaurants, as well as over 30 guest rooms. Felicia remarked in surprise that it sounded grandiose. Ines asked with a smile, could he buy it right now? She wanted to see it. He was going to buy it with the money from the mythical dragon scale, right? Then it was fine. It was a special one-time item, so he was sticking to his original plan of buying a luxury liner. Felicia added with a smile that it was his money, so please let him use it as he saw fit. MC thoughtfully said that he couldn't buy a liner yet, and he doesn't regret buying the ferry. If you consider it a small reward, then fine. He offers them to buy it. The next morning, Alessia asked if everything was all right last night. The protagonist greeted them, thanked them for their concern, and continued looking at his tablet. The girl asked what he was doing. He replied that he was buying a new ship. Dorothea exclaimed in surprise as he inserted platinum coins. MC, inserting coins into his tablet, replied that they would be shocked when they saw this ship. After that, he bought a liner and asked if everyone was ready. Now he would show off his new ship. Claretta noted with a smile, wondering what kind of ship it would be. The girls began to wonder, would it be bigger? MC spawned a huge liner and thought that now was the perfect time to make everyone's jaws drop. An incredibly huge liner, dozens of times larger than the old ship, descended from the sky onto the water. Alessia, shocked, asked, what is this, a fortress? The new ship had a capacity of 632 people. Its characteristics included unsinkability, indestructibility, and refusal to board. MC was quite surprised and wondered, were ferries always this big? 192 meters long. He'd read the description, but it was bigger than he'd imagined. The girls, shocked, exclaimed, what is this? He said he bought a ship? Is this even a ship? It's several times larger than a large ship and looks like it's made of metal. The protagonist replied that it was a type of vessel called a ferry. It's a large ship that can transport cargo and people. Alessia, shocked, asked, does this fortress-like thing actually move? MC agreed and exclaimed that he'd call this ship the SS Fortress. After that, they were transported aboard the ship. The girl exclaimed in surprise that they could get here with a magic circle. Ines immediately started running to the side, shouting that the ship was huge. The protagonist tried to stop her, but found a store and joyfully shouted that they had instant noodles, tea, canned drinks, and snacks. Afterwards, he bought a few groceries and wondered if they were using the self-service system. He wondered where the money they were paying was going. Irma remarked that it must have been incredibly delicious to make such a fuss. The MC replied that it was certainly delicious, but the thing was, he often ate it back home. Kara showed him some food and asked what they were. He explained that they were sweet snacks. This ship should have a restaurant, a bathhouse, and much more. He suggested they go look for it. After that, the whole group began exploring the ship's rooms, relaxing in the bathhouse, eating in the restaurant, and generally having fun. As it began to get dark, they all grabbed cans of soda and began happily sipping. MC reflected that the ship's amenities included a cabin for everyone. He thanked the god of creation with all his heart. Felicia said with a smile that she used this product called shampoo, and her hair became smooth. He asked if they liked the new ship. All the girls happily agreed. Irma added that it was unlike anything they had ever seen, and as for home, it's okay if he doesn't want to talk. But she thought she understood. Dorothea agreed and said she had had her thoughts too. Felicia became excited and called out to him. The protagonist replied that everything was fine. When he showed them the ship, he felt they would understand everything. It was from another world. Kara, in wild shock, exclaimed that it was from another world? He wondered in disbelief. Wasn't that what they were thinking? That in itself was incredible. The girl shouted that the food in the other world was amazing. She wanted to go there. Alessia, shocked, said she'd heard that people from another world could gain skills from the god of creation. Summoning a ship was one of those skills? The protagonist replied that it was indeed so. Claretta exclaimed, then perhaps he met the god of creation? What did he look like? As impressive as the statues in the great cathedral? He remembered that prankster guy and replied that it was almost the same. Regarding everything, could they keep it a secret? Alessia agreed with a smile and added that it was a big shock. But with a skill like that, everything made sense. They would keep his secret, but he would tell them more about his world, right? The MC agreed and thought it was the right choice to buy the ferry. Looks like the trip back to the southern city was going to be fun. The day after the celebration, he came to their cabin and greeted everyone. Only Felicia woke up, clutching her head, and greeted him back. The protagonist exclaimed excitedly, "What happened? And why is Ines lying down? Just don't let her tell him she's hungover." The girl apologized and explained that after he went to bed, she and Girasol stayed until dawn. She'd get up right away. He replied that everything was fine. He said they could relax, so let them just rest today. Just make sure they drink in moderation next time. After that, Water went into another room and, opening the menu, remarked that Felicia must have really had a good time to have a hangover. If they'd drunk that much, the others were probably still asleep. He'd take the opportunity to test his skills. Wait, the ship's summon level has increased. He had a new skill, just like with the autopilot. A system window appeared, stating that a new skill was available, boarding pass. He could select a ship he owned and issue a boarding pass for it with a validity period of his choosing. Ticket holders can board as many times as they want, as long as their tickets are valid. MC exclaimed in surprise that if he gave this to everyone from Girasol, he wouldn't have to manually confirm their boarding each time. He was using it right now. Another system window appeared, stating that once someone was assigned to the staff, they would be able to work at their assigned workstation. He could set a lodging fee for ticket holders. The lodging fee would be collected from the ship owner. The protagonist asked if this meant someone other than him would be allowed to operate the ship or something like that. It was a system for collecting money when issuing tickets. This time, the skills he'd learned were for when he used the ferry for business. Right now, only Girasol was here, so he'd be the one handing out free, indefinite tickets to everyone. He then walked down the long corridor, musing on how quiet it was today. Suddenly, Claretta came out to him and exclaimed that there was something incredible there. He should follow her. After a while, the girl led him to a play area with various machines. She pointed at a machine and asked if she'd like a toy from that box, but how could she buy it? MC replied that it was a mechanism where they insert copper coins to operate the claw that grabs toys. He wasn't very good at it, but he'd try. He inserted the money and almost pulled out the toy, but it misfired. Claretta exclaimed that she now understood how to do it. The protagonist thought that after that, the girl had become completely hooked on the claw machines. After playing all day, she ended up with all kinds of toys. Girasol woke up just after noon. Everyone quickly got used to the ferry. A week passed before they realized it. A few days later, he went out on deck and thought about how he had a feeling everyone was eating and drinking too much lately. Before, they only drank occasionally. But here they were drinking every day. Maybe he should warn them. But he didn't want them to get mad at him, now that he'd finally gotten close to them. It was very difficult. He thought, is it okay if it's only while they're on board the ferry? Suddenly, he heard a strange sound coming from the water. Looking to the side, Wataru discovered a huge crowd of monsters. Dorothea wondered when so many had gathered. MC noted that the numbers were quite high above the ocean's surface, so they hadn't noticed anything at all. The girl said that at this rate, they would follow them to the southern city. He replied that they should take them out first. Alessia happily agreed and added that they should board Klugo and destroy them from the outside. The protagonist asked if she could just tell him she thought it would be funny to pilot the boat through this horde. He was very worried, but they were surrounded by monsters, so he agreed. It was a good plan, but they weren't doing this for fun. They should be more careful. All the girls agreed, but in the end, they simply started ramming the monsters with the ship. Irma, seeing this, apologized and said she would definitely scold them later. Dorothea exclaimed that if they rocked the boat too much, they wouldn't be able to attack. Suddenly, a kraken appeared, at which point Alessia shouted that she was going inside. Claretta used her Holy Spear skill and unleashed a barrage of magical attacks. After such a powerful skill, not a single monster survived, and they returned to the ship. The protagonist, smiling, said they had done a great job. Dorothea remarked that Alessia was having too much fun. Well, it turned out to be good exercise. Kara agreed and added that she hadn't been moving much lately, so her clothes were starting to feel a little tight, just in time. All the girls began to agree with her. MC was terrified that at this rate, Girasoli would turn into a team of chubby girls. Alessia, smiling, said they had worked hard today, so she offered them a beer. He couldn't help but shout that they were all eating and drinking too much. They were ruining their bodies. Please let them show some restraint. Afterwards, their drinking parties were held only once every 2 days. 5 days later, their team returned from their trip to Palermo. Upon reaching dry land, MC said they were all doing well for surviving the long journey. Alessia happily thanked him and noted that this was their first such wonderful trip. Claretta agreed, adding that thanks to him, she was able to visit the great cathedral she'd always dreamed of. The protagonist chuckled and replied that he'd been planning to go to Palermo anyway. He called out to Dorothea and told her that if she had any information about slimes, she should let him know. He wanted to search with her. Surprised, she asked, "Is that even possible?" The protagonist agreed and explained that he wanted more people to know how cute slimes were. Dorothea thanked him and remarked that she, too, was eager to find her own slime soon. Afterwards, they said goodbye to Girasol, and he said he'd managed to sell the pepper and become closer to them. It had been a wonderful trip. Now it was time for them to hand out souvenirs as usual. Sometime later, they arrived at the Merchant Guild. Camilla, seeing them, greeted them joyfully and exclaimed she was glad that he had returned safely. MC thought it was a long time since he had seen her. How beautiful she was. She asked how he liked the big cathedral. He replied that it was truly magnificent. It truly was a once-in-a-lifetime event, and now he had something to give her again. The protagonist placed a pudding with a spoon on the table and said that it was a dessert he had prepared. Girasol really liked it when he made it for them, so please let her try it too. It's made with eggs and milk. He thought that this time he didn't buy any girly souvenirs, but she should like the pudding. Camilla tried it and fell silent. MC was perplexed. She had no reaction. Had he really screwed up somewhere? The girl immediately frowned deeply and asked, "What is this food called?" He excitedly replied that it was pudding. She exclaimed with incredible joy, What would he say about signing a contract with the Merchant Guild and distributing this recipe throughout the country? He would be able to receive 3% of the pudding sales in shops that used his recipe. The protagonist, shocked, replied that pudding was something so simple that it could be made at home. Camilla exclaimed that if it was simple, then even more shops would be able to make it. If this recipe caught on, dairy farms would prosper, and the Merchant Guild would be able to receive a percentage. He wondered in amazement that he had accidentally lit a fire in her merchant soul. Camilla exclaimed delightedly that they would enter into an official contract with the god of commerce, so he wouldn't have to worry about not getting his share. There was only profit for him. The protagonist replied that it was a dessert from his hometown, so it wasn't like he invented it. The girl said that if someone had already registered it, the contract wouldn't be concluded, and there won't be a fee for those who prepare it at home either. He'll make a contract with them, right? MC agreed, then filled out the form and handed over the pudding recipe. Camilla said with a smile that the contract was signed. After some time outside, Felicia noticed that Camilla was truly passionate about her work. Inez asked where they were going next. He replied that they would go to Donino and give him some wine. After that, they went to the carpenter and handed over the gift. The man happily thanked him and asked, didn't he ask him to make a game for him last time? It would be very interesting when he tried it. And so, some of their students want to sell it and make some money, but they needed his consent. MC said he was fine with it. Donino replied that they would then go to the Merchant Guild and make a contract. After some time, they returned to the guild. Camilla, seeing the board game, asked if this was also something from his hometown. The protagonist agreed, and the girl's expression immediately changed. He thought things were bad. Now she would ask him where he was from. She might find out he was from another world. The girl, with a serious expression, remarked that such knowledge was a resource. Please let him not spread it so carelessly. Sometime later, the protagonist bought fresh grilled oysters and treated his allies. Ines mockingly asked if Camilla had scolded him, right? He agreed, adding that he was hungry because it had been so exciting. The girl agreed and was about to eat when Waters suddenly stopped her, pulled out a bottle, and said he'd bought something really cool on the ferry. She should pour some soy sauce on the oysters. It would be incredibly delicious. Felicia remarked that it went very well with oysters. Suddenly, people passing by started stopping, as they were so taken with the smell. MC nervously said that they needed to clean up the sauce and finish their meal quickly. After that, they went to the inn and rented a room. Wataru, sitting on the bed, remarked that perhaps he'd been too relaxed lately, although they needed to keep a low profile. Felicia said that, after all, they'd spent a lot of time on ships. Ines smiled and remarked that his skills were amazing, so maybe he should become a hero. The protagonist exclaimed in surprise. He would never be a hero. He couldn't fight to save his life. She shouldn't say that, or she will jinx it. Suddenly, there was a knock at the door. It was Sarah, the innkeeper. She walked in and said that people in the lobby wanted to meet him. Suddenly, Alessia swung the door open and shouted, "Please lend them your strength." Dorothea approached her and apologized for the intrusion. The leader of the group shouted that she would pay him everything she had for his help. MC worriedly wondered, was this the trouble the god of creation had spoken of? What could it even be? Dorothea explained that a war had broken out. It seemed the city they'd come from, Lucca, was surrounded by imperial army ships. A little earlier, in the kingdom of Brescia, a servant had run to the lord with the report that Fort Lugorn had fallen. The lord nervously exclaimed, "How could that be? So they can't expect reinforcements from the capital. The damned empire has abandoned the beast kingdom and set its sights on Lucca. They must defend the city, no matter the cost." The protagonist was shocked to think that the god of creation was telling him to go to war. Dorothea began to explain that for many years, the empire had been at war with its neighbors, such as the Beast Kingdom and the Kingdom of Brescia. Recently, they had been fighting the Beast Kingdom, but suddenly switched to invading Lucca. Lucca is one of the most prosperous cities in the Kingdom of Brescia and an important trading port, but the city should be able to withstand an imperial attack to some extent. Alessia noted that all 6 of them were born and raised in Lucca. She knew it was terrible to ask him to get involved in the war, but all their friends and family were there. They weren't asking for much. Please let him help them. The protagonist nervously wondered if he really didn't want to. He was completely incapable of heroism and had no idea what to do. There was no way he could attack other people. The best he could do was maybe use his ship summoning as a barrier, and even then, he might not be able to stomach all the killing happening before his eyes. First of all, isn't it strange that his first act of heroism was war? Why would the god of creation do this? What should he do? He wanted to curl up and hide, but he couldn't abandon them when they were so worried. Or rather, he didn't even have the courage to refuse them. In that case, he needed to confess. MC said he was a real coward, which is why he couldn't fight. He also wanted his skills and origins to remain a secret. If she didn't mind, he would defend himself, run away, and help them. Alessia was overjoyed and thanked them. Afterwards, they loaded various supplies onto the crafted ship and set off. The protagonist, standing at the helm, thought things had gotten very serious. He noted that a regular magical ship would take about 20 days to reach Lucca. If he set Klugo to travel at night, they could probably get there in about 10 days. They needed to act quickly. The protagonist thought he was still nervous. If someone important noticed him at war, he would be in trouble. Felicia, having changed her outfit, called out to him and noted that it was the cloak he bought before leaving. "How does she look in it?" MC exclaimed admiringly that he could hide his face. In case they had to show themselves to people, they could pass themselves off as mysterious wizards. "By the way, how is Girasol?" Inez replied that they were very tense. They were discussing what to do after they reached Luca, but nothing was working out. The protagonist called out to the girls and asked if he could leave the controls to them for a while. He wanted to go check on them. Afterwards, he headed to the cabin, when suddenly, on the way, he heard loud screams. Dorothea exclaimed that if they approached from the sea, they would be noticed immediately. Kara excitedly said that the Empire recognized human superiority. Beastmen would not be spared. Alessia shouted, "What if soldiers had already broken into the city?" Camilla replied that Luca was still safe. They needed to check it out. Marina said that if they attacked using the SS Fortress, they might be able to break the blockade. MC, hearing this as always, nervously thought that he didn't want this. Alessia happily agreed and remarked that there was no larger ship in this world. Irma stopped her and asked if she knew for sure that Wataru would agree to such a blatant strategy, right? Ultimately, they should see the situation in Luca before making a decision. The protagonist stepped away from the cabin and noted that they were completely stumped. They were all worried, so he supposed it was only natural. If only there was some kind of useful ship. If the port was surrounded, he thought it would be better to use a smaller boat that could approach closer unnoticed. He opened the system window and saw a powerful speedboat, and then exclaimed in surprise that this was very cool. It cost 81 gold coins, which is 81 million yen. It could carry 9 people. The maximum speed was 210 kilometers per hour. It was a frightening speed, but this way they might be able to get past the enemy fleet and other magical ships, and it wouldn't be as noticeable as the ferry. Plus, it might even lift everyone's spirits before they reached Luca. After some time, MC spawned a speedboat and said that this ship was undoubtedly the fastest of all the boats and ships in existence today, if they could just master it. Suddenly, Alessia interrupted him and exclaimed that they could sink the enemy fleet's ships. He was shocked to think that wasn't why he bought it.